Good morning, and thank you for tuning in. This is Sunrise, and I am Alero Idu.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Good morning and welcome. Yes.
We missed you last week.
Yeah, don't be surprised that we're here now. We're here now, so welcome. I hope you got your cup of cocoa.
Oh, Coco,
Oh, cocoa.
as the spirit moves you. And I hope that you all voted last week.
Well, I think it was on by the upper Monday. I was close to saying, go get your PVC.
We have long crossed that bridge.
Exactly. I said, if you hadn't got your PVC, I don't know.
Too bad. Too bad.
I just didn't know what to say.
But unfortunately, the number of voters, the number of those who took part in the election is recorded to be approximately 25 million. So the figure has dropped in spite of all the entreaties of civil society, us here, media, INEC, everybody. How is it? But then, of course, we note that many people's votes were not even, many people were not even allowed to vote who wanted to vote.
You know, even if we, okay, so I had a theory, on one of the programs that we had, that the number of voters included the media, who will not vote.
True.
Security operatives will not be able to vote.
Yeah.
INEC officials will not be able to vote. INEC ad hoc officials who will not be able to vote. Election observers who will not be able to vote. That's quite a sum. So, plus or minus, say, 5–10 million of people like that. Because at least in INEC officials alone, according to INEC information, ad hoc staff they hired were about more than 1 million.
Wow.
So
well, Nigeria is a big country.
Exactly. Pressmen, radio, television, newspapers, online, quite a chunk. Election observers from
far and wide.
And then
within
several civil society organizations, quite a number as well. So security officials, NSCDC, police, soldiers, who would be spread all over the place. Then SAs and PAs to government officials.
To big men.
Have to go with them.
With their bosses, so they too may not be able to vote.
That's quite a sum. So if we put all of those together, that is substantial.
Yeah.
In the same number, especially if they all registered.
No, but we add it to that number. Because 25 is those who voted.
That's what, okay, yes, that's what I'm saying. Okay, so okay, let's add it to the numbers.
Yes.
Okay,
so let's say
35
about
million?
30.
Okay, 30 million. You know. Okay, fine. So 30 million, what happened to the others?
Out of 93.
Add to those.
Who registered.
Add to the number those who have japa. Okay, but I don't even have the stats for that one. But you can't even, lay on.
I am beginning
93.
to hate that word.
You can't even lay it all on 93 million, but 87 million who picked up their voter cards.
Yes.
Now, what I have also seen over the years, the year we had a jump in number of voters was in 2003. Since that time, the higher the number of voters on the register,
the lower
the number of voters.
Actual voters.
Of actual voters that come out to make the sacrifice.
Yeah.
So, despite all the noise and admonition and appeal and everything that we had, people still didn't turn out to vote. And those, let's say those who are unable to vote are up to say like a 500,000 to say 1 million.
Yeah.
Add to the number, that's say 36 million. I don't know if we have been able to successfully, persuade ourselves how important it is. Well, I know, I mean, voter apathy is a global thing.
Yeah.
Not every country has people who don't vote, you know, but at the end of the day, we should be asking ourselves serious questions. Why do people not come out to vote?
And how much do you think that the happenings of last week will affect the happenings of next week?
You know, for me, Alera, the most important thing right now is for us to recognize we need to have a country to have elected officials. We need to ensure that we are at peace. We need to be convinced, persuaded beyond measure that despite everything that is happening, we have a country. Secondly, we have chosen one mode of employing leaders, and that is participatory democracy.
Yeah.
If we do not come out to vote, we have voted.
Indirectly.
I mean, we are part of a decision, whether we want to agree with it or not. So those considerations are important for us to know. So when we get out to, as the next Saturday approaches, we should ask some serious questions. And one of the challenges that I've also seen is, Alera, we don't really interrogate issues. We don't. Okay, I have another theory that I often come up with. Like, do we even know the job description of the jobs, the jobs that we want to give out to people?
Well, we have spoken about that at length on this program. You know, we keep saying we are looking to employ. So those guys are applicants.
Yep.
And you must interrogate, you must interview them. Do they fit the bill of what do they fit the description of the job you want done? Do you think they're going to be able to do the job? You know, all that. But it looks like that's just an intellectual exercise.
Well, right
in the
now,
meantime,
in the meantime,
there's still no money. The elections are over and there's still no money.
We'll still talk about that one later this morning.
Yes, in the body of the program.
It's a very, very important EU.
And there's still fuel queues.
Oh, fuel queues, Naira queues. Let's see what happens in
All the queues are still there.
Let's see what happens.
I drove past the bank yesterday, and you should see the number of people waiting at the ATM. And I thought to myself, by the time it gets to you at the end of that line, that ATM might be empty. So you would have wasted God knows how many hours, and you're sweaty and sticky and smelling because you want to collect 10,000 naira.
Those issues are tiresome, Alera. Very, very tiresome.
Anyway, our menu for today. We're going to begin by looking at the issue of leadership in search of transformative leadership. What does all that mean?
Well, I know the meaning of transform.
A leader who's going to transform Nigeria?
Or the people. And don't forget the word is leadership. Hey, no, we're not doing that.
Okay.
Next one would be Naira Redesign Palaver. How far so far?
Big palaver, that one.
So what happens in the week ahead?
And in the middle of all this, we still have the environment to think about. World Wildlife Day 2023.
For parents of teens, today is your day.
Those very difficult people.
Today is your day.
Teenagers, they are in a world of their own.
And we're not even talking to an old person. We're talking to a young person who is still not too far from teenage.
Oh dear.
And is anyway, we'll get into that later on. And
then we shall close with the artist of the week.
Who is
as is usual on Sunrise.
Who is
well, he's a human being.
Oh God. Please grab your cup of cocoa. We'll be right back. That message, we cannot tell ourselves more. We are all we have. I mean, and in any environment, in any human society, There have to be leaders and there have to be the citizens.
Followers.
Whichever way, whichever community, whether it's a monarchy or oligarchy or whatever it is, we have to have leaders and we have to have people who are led. So questions around leadership, Nigeria's space of economic development and political and social stability have been with us since our journey towards nationhood started years ago. Now the challenge principally is that the gap between the ideas and theories of leadership and its practice and application in the context of Nigeria continues to be questionable. I remember that conversation we had with Dr. Shubande, who said, look, he wrote a book, Why Leadership Principles Don't Work in Africa, something like that, you know. So our best organized conversations, dialogues, and platforms on the subject have remained unsuccessful in initiating and or catalyzing the change and reforms required to narrow the gap. Now today, Nigeria is in a delicate place, an extremely delicate place with grave insecurity, macroeconomic instability, stagflation. I've not heard that one before until came across it.
You have.
Stagnant inflation. What does that mean? I mean, we'll probably get into that later on. An alarming deficit of education, poverty, unemployment, you name all the issues.
Oh dear. The list is as long as my arm, huh?
So, who are we looking for? Or should I say, what are we looking for? Who or what best approximates the qualities we need or has the humility to procure and widen those qualities from truthful advisors, or should I say team? Let's have this conversation this morning with Dr. John Ekundayo, who is a leadership consultant and organizational strategist. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll have another professor join us later on, but so far, Dr. Ekundayo, how would you say we are, should I say, inching towards our goal or aspiration of having the leader Nigeria needs?
That's a great question. Looking at the scenario we are in the nation, our nation presently now is so fragmented along tribal lines, religious lines, regional lines, you know, and also the youth, the youthful population. They are up and against the old politicians, you know, name it, whether in the APC or PDP, and that's why they are voicing out vehemently with their votes that, okay, there must be a change in the order. Like, you know, I was interfacing with one of them and, you know, telling him something, oh, I want you to follow my way of thinking. And he says, no, I'm not going to agree with you. Even my two daughters in the house, they are not going the same way with me politically.
You are not
I convinced them they couldn't. Yes. You know, because they are saying, that's, one of them was telling me, look, I'm now in another country, and I'm supposed not to be there. That I'm supposed to, even though she couldn't vote, but the way she was even supporting some, you know, this thing here and youth, it will be, it's like somebody who is even credible to vote here. So our own politicians need to know this, that, you know, really the youth, because some of them have traveled, they have gone to other nations, they have gone to other countries, and they see how things move, how things work. I lived, for example, 7 years in Southeast nations of Malaysia and Singapore, and I could see how things work in those countries. And at times I begin to look at it that, look, is it that we don't have resources in Nigeria? Whether you are talking about human resources or mineral resources or natural resources or whatever, is it? So I think it is time that, you know, it is high time for the leaders to note that actually the need to effect certain changes, and that it will not be business as usual.
You know, it's very interesting when you put it that way, because we always have successive leadership. But you know, let me bring in Professor Vincent Anibogo, who is Director General, International Institute of National Transformation. He joins us virtually this morning. Thank you for joining us, Prof.
Thank you so much for inviting me again.
Well, Prof, this is where we are. We're talking about our search for transformational leadership, or
Yes.
a transformative leadership. How far so far would you say we have journeyed towards that aspiration as a people?
Before I even answer that, let me try to see if I can capture where we are and what is going on. I think in this election, we've seen Nigerians, both young and old, rising up and say, we desire a new Nigeria. And that voice is unanimous. It's across different tribes, across gender, across, all different religious sectors, that we desire a new Nigeria where there is freedom, where there's unity, where there is prosperity, and where there is progress. We are tired of this retrogressive cycle that we find ourselves in.
Moment, but we have Dr. Ekundaya with us in the studio. In light of the recent elections, I have tried hard not to bring the elections in, but our search for a leader has just ended. A fresh, and a president-elect has just been announced. How would you say that we did in that search? Were we barking up the wrong tree, or were we towing the right path?
Really, democracy is about choice. And like I always write and say, there's a Yoruba talking drum called Gangan. And, Gangan has two faces. And, he's facing somebody, and somebody is saying that's the front. But another person also looking from somewhere else is also saying that is the front. So there's a kind of, argument. You see, so democracy is about choice. And there are dangers of democracy to certain people in that, why are you choosing that way? Why are you going that route? But you see, like I was saying, I was convincing my two daughters, biological daughters, and they were going different, diametrically opposite to my own direction, and we are not even aligning. But, that is that. It's not that we are fighting, but because what they are saying, I have not seen it. So that really...
And what you are seeing, they are not seeing.
They are not seeing it. So that is
Could that demonstrate something about failure of leadership at some point?
I agree. Failure of leadership. And I've said that, prior to this time. Now, I lived 7 years in Southeast Asian nations of Singapore for 4 years, 7 years in Malaysia. And I could see the two countries, things working well. And you can see leaders that are checkmated, they are monitored, they are evaluated.
What I raised there is to even help to see if we can track where we are coming from and where we probably lost the leadership, followership, should I say, train. Because what you are saying is quite instructive. We had a senior advocate of Nigeria who is also a former Attorney General in Oyo State, said the same thing you're saying. Himself and his kids were not on the same page about who to vote for president. Now, in terms of carrying along generation after generation, what it demonstrates is that even from the home, we seem to have lost that carry along ethos. So over the years, what happens from the home expands to the cities,
to the society,
and ultimately to the nation.
Yeah.
So how do we reverse that?
Well, that's why we need national orientation. In agenda setting for whoever is taking over, there's a need to have a national reconciliation and healing. And there's a need to also have value orientation. We have lost our values, and that's why we need to come down to values of honesty, loyalty, service, diligence. We need to bring all that back. Integrity, we need to bring, the leaders have to show example.
Incidentally, Dr. Kunai, all of those things are in the Constitution. How we use it, that's another thing. Let's see if we can get Professor Anibogo, hear him now. Well, Prof, are you still there?
I'm here, sir.
Okay.
Well, we can hear you clearly now.
Yes, so you were trying to make a point about, before you respond to my question. Please go ahead.
I was trying to say, Yemi, that first of all, we cannot avoid discussing the election. It is the hottest issue in the atmosphere now, so we cannot ignore it. But I think it has shown, just to answer your question, for transformative leadership to occur, the people must be ready to take the journey. And I hear Nigerians say we are ready to undertake that journey to a new Nigeria. However, question is, what kind of leadership will take us there? What we see playing out in Nigeria are two types of leadership. The so-called, what the Greek calls the politikakous. Politikakous are what we call model citizens or noble leaders that have the character, that have the strength, have the moral fortitude, have the vision to take us there. And then there's what we call the politikasta. The Greek calls that the imposters, the impersonators, the people that proclaim to be leaders, but they are really using leadership for their own selfish aim. Such people will never take Nigeria to that type of destiny that we desire. So the old represent what I call the politikasters. The new that's emerging represent what I call the politikakous. They have the model, they have the nobility, they have the humility, they have the love of the people. So there's a transition now from the old to the new. We have looked around the world and we have seen the type of leaders that have taken their nations to that desired destination. And what I see Nigerians say, we want to embrace that kind of leadership that we can feel, we can touch. So what is going on in Nigeria is a battle between the old and the new. And I'm totally convinced that the force of the new is so convincing, so strong, that the old ways of doing business, the old ways of doing politics is no longer going to last. This is the season for transformational leaders who are humble, who are not there for what they can get. They're really there for what they can do for the people. In that sense, I'm not discouraged at all. I'm actually excited that we are finally at this point where the people are willing and ready to be involved. So the journey to me to true republic is just starting.
But Prof, are you therefore saying that those that our politics has thrown up in the past are not the kind of leaders that we should have been shopping for, the ones who would take us to our destination, so to speak?
I had my friend, Pastor Larry Thompson, one time said to me, said there are two kinds of founding fathers. There are founding fathers that liberate nations, like giving birth to a child, and they understand what that child needs from a childhood to adulthood, and they make sure they provide the environment, the food, the security, everything that child needs to maturity. We call them founding fathers. There are another type of fathers. They are called the liberating fathers. They give birth to a nation, but they don't really know how to nurture that nation. And that nation almost literally, I wouldn't say die, but is undernourished, not directed well, and they suffer from malnutrition and underdevelopment. That's, for the most part, what we have seen in Africa, not just in Nigeria, that after 62 years of independence, we are still struggling with the question of existence, not even stability and progress, but existence. Clearly shows that we have had leaders that really have given birth to a nation, but they are still struggling as to what they need to feed the nation. And I'm sorry to say, for the most part, they have fed themselves and not the nation. So I am correct. But a new type of leadership is emerging that will put their selfish interests aside and really focus on nurturing the nation. Because when it's good for the nation, it's good for everybody, including the leadership.
Well, Prof, you know, I've had a couple of conversations with a few friends since Wednesday. And one of the things that keeps coming up is the metadata of leadership for me. Because I believe that the metadata of leadership contains vision. Yes, I was embarrassed. Well, should I say embarrassed? Professor Killer called me out on Wednesday and said, I'm fixated on vision because I always talk about it. Because I don't see how we can have leadership without direction. So I'm wondering, from the very beginning of our nationhood, at what point would you say we have ever really coined a vision that the young, the middle-aged, and the old can identify with and market to successive generations so that the identity of the nation is known? The US, for instance, always have this tagline of, the greatest nation in the world or something like that. And I also cited the example of the name Great Britain. I mean, it's like, look, we're great, period, and they go with it. So we've also had modern nations that were built literally from nothing. There are those who would cite Dubai as such an instance. So in terms of vision for the country, what would you say is that vision, if there is? And if there isn't, how do we come up with one that will be accepted by all Nigerians and we will elect or appoint or employ leaders who fit the bill?
Thank you so much. If you actually look at the history of Nigeria, we have had great vision programs. The Vision 2010 is an excellent program, which if it had followed, would have moved Nigeria forward. And then, of course, Obasanjo came with his own vision, another excellent document. And then Goodluck came with Vision 2020, another. So, but you notice that all these are documents on a piece of paper. In order to move a nation forward, after you have documented the vision, number one thing you need is a leader that is passionate about that vision and drives that vision and tries to bring the best mind on board to execute that vision. That's number one. Number two, you need good followers, just as my friend Professor Okundayo has been saying. Leaders that are also passionate, that can follow the main leader to make sure that that vision comes to pass. What happens many times is that when we elect a president, I'm sorry to say, many of them come with their own agenda, separate from the national agenda. So we really need leaders that are tribalists, that really love the nation. I don't think we have had some that love the nation, but we have not had many that have the interest of the nation at heart first, before their tribe and before their region. That is the missing link in our journey to development. Because without a strong leader leading the way, showing others what to do, again, we keep referring to Lee Kuan Yew. That's what he did. In fact, towards the end of his life, he was so tired, so worn out, but he said, what did I do with my life? I fully devoted it to build Singapore. In that process, I am totally exhausted. But what did I leave behind? A transformed Singapore. Which of our leaders can truly say that? That I gave all I have to change a nation, and at the end of it, I succeeded. There are very few that can say that. Yeah. So we need strong leadership.
Well, Dr. Kundayo, so you've heard Prof, and I'm pretty sure you have one or two things that you want to say to that, but perhaps, you can take it from this angle. Most of the time, when we talk about leadership, we look at the president or the governor. However, in a participatory democracy such as we have, the presidential system that we're practicing, there are quite a number of people in leadership, in the executive, in the legislature, and in the judiciary. In the executive, we have one elected official with a co-runner, so to speak, who appoints so many people, more than almost 1,500 people that have to work with him at the executive level for ministries, departments, agencies, and corporations of the federal government. Same thing at the state level. Now, we also have leaders in the National Assembly, the legislature. We have leaders in the judiciary. Do you think we're too fixated on one person and not really paying attention to the leadership at other tiers?
I quite agree with you. I was reading a recent Simon Kolawole in this day newspaper, and it was talking about something which is, in this context, is relevant to bring out. The tune at the top. The tune at the top. Now, the president should set the tune. Body language, action, and one thing I've seen is Nigerians are good followers. I tell you, even from the days of military, look at it, they of Murtala Mohammed, with Obasanjo partnering and so on. And when, you had this, all this war against indiscipline, whatever, and Buhari, at that time, the military. You see, but the thing is, we didn't have a sustained something, and it was under a military. But even under a democratic setting, when the leader at the top, there's a tone at the top, that's important. Other people will key into it, even the judiciary, even the legislature, everyone, the executive, we key into it. You see, when they are like Lee Kuan Yew, like Professor was referring to him. I stayed 4 years in Singapore. He set the tone at the top. He emerged from among them, but then quickly he let them know it is not going to be business as usual. And the way it started, he changed the uniform of the party to white. PAP, People's Action Party. Don't mind Singaporean, they say people's pay and pay. But, that's just, but he changed the uniform. And he said, why? There will be zero tolerance for corruption. And he sampled his uncle. And everybody became afraid and said, this man must be a madman. But everybody aligned. We need a leader to set the tone at the top, at the judiciary, at the legislature, at the executive. You see, and we were talking about, in search of transformative leadership. Fine. Transformative leadership is really about followers. But the transformational leader must be a leader that set the tone at the top, so that followers will emulate, and there will be influential dynamic interactions between the leaders and the followers going on a journey. Now, going back to the last something, which you say, well, maybe I will need to talk about, that journey, that is the vision. We are looking at it, where we are going. We are looking at the big picture. But then we have somebody setting the tone at the top who can impart the same thing to followers, who will be able to follow. And that's where, like Prof was talking about, Vision 2020, all this other vision. I have not seen Nigeria. I'm now on the national television. I have not seen Nigeria having a strategic change plan. I've been saying it, and I want anybody to fault me. We have not, all these 3 year, 5 year, Singapore set out 40-year strategic change plan. I studied there, and they were following it, monitoring, evaluating, learning, and feeding back to the system. What works? What didn't work? How can it work? That's what we need in Nigeria. We don't need 5 year, 3 year, all this short term. Where are we going? Nigeria we should be thinking in the next 20 years. We want to be, or in the next 40 years, a first world nation. It's doable with the humongous resources we have. Human resources, mineral resources, and all. We need a leader to bring it together and to carry followers along in a transformational journey.
Doctor, you said about a vision for the people to follow. But no leader has actually articulated a vision for Nigerians to look up to and say, okay,
few words,
this is where we want to be. This is where I want to take you people. So follow me on this journey.
Yeah.
There has been no such person, has there?
Yes, I agree with you. You see, like I said, and that actually aches me. You see, because, you know why? I did my master's while I was in Singapore, and there was a particular seminar that I attended, and the facilitator was saying, look, and he was showing us, Lee Kuan Yew came in, then he was minister mentor, no more prime minister, but still at the sideline. That he came in when they separated from Malaya. Malaysia used to be Malaya before. Then Singapore came out, Malaysia came out. That immediately it set a tone that by the new millennium, 2000, there about 40 years, it was a 40-year strategic change plan. We are moving from this underdeveloped, because Indonesia, the neighboring nation, was referring to Singapore at that time. Look, this one wants to start a country. You are a tiny dot in the ocean. That was the language being used to, the Singaporeans can still remember that story. They can't forget. But today, in fact, not even today, 10 years, a decade back, Indonesia can never, even though with the small population that they are and small land mass, they cannot. You see, because they know that Singapore, the workforce of Indonesia migrating to work, to do many jobs. You see, because for Singaporean now, you are looking for a housemate. Singaporean will not do housemate. They won't do gardener. No, they won't do all that. It's for Bangladeshi. I lived there for years. It's for Indonesia to do that. Malaysia will not even do that, because Malaysia is even exporting their own people to the Middle East. They are training them in vocational skill, in digital skill. I live among them. These are things that we should have our leaders doing.
We're exporting our doctors.
That's DAPA. That's not the kind of thing. We don't have enough. You see, the doctor-patient ratio in Nigeria is abysmal, and it's even right, even in the last 5 years. Now, to even talk of it now, nobody can even bring that ratio right now. It's appalling.
Professor, are you there?
Yes.
Yes. Let me just rephrase something that my partner asked you earlier. It's regarding this vision matter again. Since we have not really had articulated to us a vision per se, if you were to advise, what would you say should be our vision at this point in the life of our nation?
Well, I think I hear people saying, number one, let's change the mode of politics. That is something we must do. Let's be more deliberate. And I think people are doing that, but the system is not allowing it to happen. First of all, they are saying most politics be brutish first. before it is noble. We are saying we can make our political system noble. There's nothing really to fight unless somebody is going there for what he can gain. So can politics be a mode of service delivery? That's number one. Number two, can we make progress instead of repeating history? Can we make new history? And number three, and let me say this, if we see all kinds of technological advancement, all kinds of contrivances being made, are we really saying that Nigeria has become morally bankrupt? Are we saying that there are no people of integrity, excellence, who can serve for the purpose of service, not who can go there for other reasons? If we can correct and have this mindset, then once we set a vision, as my friend said, the vision is the destination that we want to attain. But without disciplined people, without people of the right mindset, I don't care how good a vision is, it will never be realized. Because it is people that have the right mindset that will work out the vision. It has been said, any group of people can achieve anything as long as they don't mind who takes the credit. You and I can come together and accomplish great things as long as I don't care whether you get the credit or I get the credit. The kind of people that will do that are people that are selfless, people that are vision-centered, people that are passionate about their nation, and people that want to achieve something tangible before they die.
But Prof, just
and
one,
to do
my
that,
apologies for butting in.
Our education system is going to be the key.
Just a second, Prof, and I know that you may want to still touch on education, health, and all this other, whatever, but we operate a participatory democracy with a 4-year cycle. Should we have a leader come up and say, this is the national vision and the trajectory we should be going, and has, say, some 5 words, say, okay, good people, great nation, for instance, or this is where we are going over the next 40 years. This fellow has only 4 years,
Yes.
most 8 years. Should there be another government come in that's not on the same political platform, even if they are on the same political platform, what's the assurance that that vision will be sustained? Because I think that's part of the challenge that those previous vision coinages that you talked about that we had before, the vision plans and all, maybe that was the challenge that they had. They weren't sustained because whoever it would be in office at any given time has very, very limited number of years to be there. How do we ensure continuity and sustainability of those visions in the interest of Nigeria?
We can still succeed in that context. And let me tell you how. By the way, we should make it clear that anyone that desires to lead Nigeria must go through certain institutions. You can't just walk out from the street of UK and invite to be the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. You can't do that. There are preparatory steps you must have gone through. We need to insist, if they must all first of all go through NIPS, and NIPS curriculum structured so that they actually produce competent leaders. When you make that a requirement, then anyone that comes to that platform, there's a certain level of uniformity in their thinking. They have a sense of patriotism. There's a minimal standard that they carry. That's number one. And anyone that will vie for office under any political party must meet that minimum standard. Right now, we don't have that standard. And people are coming to that platform with all kinds of different mentality, philosophy, and what have you. Number two, any political party that is in power, and you know that as a candidate, you only have 4 years, you should start from the day you enter, grooming 2 or 3 other persons that can succeed you, to whom you actually transfer the wisdom, the knowledge, and so on. In the event you don't continue, they will continue. Nigerians are very sensitive. Once they see a leader that is sincere and that is actually producing results, they will vote for that person. But when you're not producing results and you're just there holding a title, Nigerians will become, once you disenfranchise them, they will not connect. So I think for every system, there are ways to go around it. It takes preparation. It takes thinking ahead to beat that system. Lee Kuan Yew, by the way, have to vie for election every certain years. I don't know how long that was. He wasn't just automatically elected. He was always elected based on his achievements.
Yes.
At every term, he had accomplished so much that people would say, please keep ruling us.
Yeah.
Political parties must have that mentality. And, you know, of course, there will be challenges with that because the time frame is too short.
Exactly.
But it can still be worked out.
We're running out of time completely, but I just think I should say something because in talking about leaders, you dwelt on the president, the governor, the legislators, you know, and the judiciary and all that. But you forgot to also mention that their leadership or their leaders at other levels as well, such as parents, such as
even private sector
teachers. Those are all leaders as well. And where parents are concerned, the basic values are imbued in a child from home. The son of a thief, for instance, turns out to be a thief, and you're not surprised. But the son of a good leader from home is likely to turn out to be a decent human being himself. So, I mean, we must not forget that aspect of it, you know, the home front,
the family,
and how the values are actually put in a child from when...
Please close with that.
I agree with that. From the family, it's important, and that's how, even in the holy books, how, you know, God started the whole system. So that's why I was still talking about value orientation. Even right from the home, putting some values. You know, I used to tell my children, if I'm asking you to do what I'm not doing, then you may not do it. And that is it, leading by example, right from the home unit, right from the family unit. Very key. And it will go to the society.
Well, if you look at section 22 and 23, I think, of the Constitution, those things are there, incidentally. Well, we have to thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of this conversation this morning. Dr. John Ekunda is a leadership development consultant as well as organizational strategist. And we've had the privilege of Professor Vincent Anigbogu, who is Director General, International Institute of National Transformation. Prof, thank you so much for your perspectives this morning.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's number one, leadership. But then we have been led in a particular way, especially concerning Naira. That's up when we return from this break.
One day, our Niger go good. Now so them they talk. One day, our mumu go do. Now so we talk. This country take our hand.
That picture is still extremely famous.
One day, our Niger go good. That's what we've been hanging on for all these decades. And we're still believing that one day it go good. Because we are so blessed, Ayo. I mean, God cannot put all this talent and all these resources in one place for it to come to no good.
Above ground, on ground, and under the ground.
It go good. We believe you, area father. So, the Supreme Court on Friday, yesterday, ordered that the old 200, 500, and 1,000 Naira notes remain in circulation until December 31st, 2023. That is until the end of this year.
That's 9 months away.
The Apex Court also nullified the federal government's Naira Redesign policy, declaring it as an affront to the 1999 Constitution. Well, I'm still trying to understand that and I begin to wonder whether I have stopped understanding English, but we'll get to that. Justice Emmanuel Agim, who read the lead judgment, held that the preliminary objections of the defendants, the Attorney General of the Federation, Bayelsa and Edo States, are dismissed as the court has the jurisdiction to entertain the suit. To look at all this with us this morning, I'd like to welcome Dr. Olubenga Adeoye, a chartered accountant. Good morning.
It's my pleasure.
And joining us from our studio in Abuja is our old friend, Mr. Tokwe Fashoa. Good morning.
Morning.
How are you today? You don't look happy at all, Mr. Fashoa. Whence cometh this face you're giving us this morning? You don't have any money in your pocket? No cash?
Well, it's everywhere. Yeah. Well, everybody's looking for cash, but we'll get there. I believe with a bit of patience, we'll achieve what we want.
Yeah, I guess Nigerians are used to going out now with no money in their pockets. It seems to be the new normal, and they don't even worry about it.
No, they're worried.
No, they don't bother that they're not carrying any money. You know, it's for them, it's the new normal.
It's actually becoming an excuse for so many things that you ought to do that you don't even want to do now.
Yeah.
You know? So, and I think from the noise you hear all over, you see that the people are affected more than the perceived targets. The people, the government, they thought they wanted to achieve something. But where to start from is to look at the merit of that judgment. Section 232 sub 1 of the Constitution stipulates clearly that the Supreme Court, to the exclusion of any other court in Nigeria, shall, take note of that word, shall have original jurisdiction in any dispute between the Federation and any state or between states. And insofar as that dispute has to do with any question, whether it's of law or fact, on which the existence of a legal right or extent of a legal right depends. And so there have been arguments about, whether the Supreme Court has right to entertain the matter or not. We also must also understand that the justices of the Supreme Court, or indeed all courts in Nigeria, they are not intermeddlers. They are not busybody people. They actually entertain matters that are brought before them. Now, when you talk of the federal government of Nigeria, as a lawyer, what we believe is that if you take any company to court, that company cannot tell you, the action for which you are challenging me was carried out by the company secretary, so sue the company secretary. It was carried out by the internal auditor, so sue the internal auditor. So the hands and the legs of the federal government are its agencies, such as Standard Organization of Nigeria, NAFDAC,
CBN.
Central Bank of Nigeria,
All
and
1,484 ministries, departments, agencies, and corporations of the federal government.
In fact, there are too many. So, but I pray whoever gets there will review that. So, you can see that the Supreme Court actually has jurisdiction. And like Nelson Mandela said, that any man that changes his principle, depending on who he or she is dealing with, is not worthy to be a leader. And so, for other lawyers to come out and say, oh, they don't have to entertain this matter, they are not supposed to look into it, I think they are off course.
Okay. Mr. Fashua, so I know that the central bank did, I'm sorry, the Supreme Court gave a ruling, I think about 2 weeks ago, and that was not obeyed by the federal government or its agency, the central bank. But this one now that says that those three denominations will be in circulation until December this year. Do you see the central bank or the federal government obeying that ruling?
Well, okay, I think that the decision 2 weeks ago and the reaction of the president, especially the president, to that ruling was kind of mishandled, if you ask me. Given that maybe, as Ayo has said, even though I can't see anybody on screen here, so I hope the guys in Abuja will help. So as I think Ayo said that, you know, the president actually represents the federal government. Every parastatal agencies under the presidency can therefore, you know, the president is the go-to person, which is what underlies the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court in this instance. So in that instance, I think that it could probably have been better handled rather than just ignoring it or making another pronouncement, which has been said to also usurp the authorities and the functions of the central bank. I think that this time around, this policy may be, will be, you know, obeyed. But to the extent that what we're hearing before the president made a pronouncement on 200 Naira was that the central bank had fully destroyed all the 500 and 1,000 Naira, the old one, and so on and so forth, and therefore that the money they have put out now is what they have. Whether we're going to see a difference in what is obtaining presently is a different ballgame entirely. But I think that also what we're hoping is that elections being over, and given all the rhetoric we've heard about some politicians have grabbed all the money that they printed and all of that, we are hoping that people will continue to spend and that the money that have been pushed out will come back into circulation. I'm also hoping, personally, that the central bank will do everything that it can to ensure that the pains of the people are eased up, because this is a very, very interesting, if you like, scenario for most Nigerians who've never had to deal with something like this. You know, it's kind of a shock therapy to everybody that you'd have to queue up to get your funds in the bank and so on. However, the Supreme Court judgment this time around has several implications for monetary policy. Indeed, I actually do agree that the Supreme Court can intervene, especially as a matter of you know, public policy, as a matter of safety. You know, if people start to go around to destroy bank branches and there are millions of people trying to get their money and they can't, of course the Supreme Court can intervene. To what extent it can intervene, that's another you know, ballgame entirely. The Section 19 and 20 of the CBN Act clearly gives, you know, says what should happen in this instance of currency management. Section 19, you know, 1A and B, subsections A, B, actually says and repeated that the president is the final arbiter in the matter of currency redesign and what have you. And Section 20 as well does confirm that subsection C that, you know, that the president can give the central bank instruction to actually take a few currencies out of being legal tenders, given a certain reasonable notice. The question then becomes, what is reasonable notice? And so on and so forth. Now, but in the judgment that the Supreme Court has given now, have they invalidated or vitiated the CBN Act? That's the issue. to the extent that even on matters of mere monetary policy, if the central bank does not get the Supreme Court, approval, or maybe they might not be able to move on in matters of interest rate setting, monetary policy rate, cash reserve ratio, liquidity ratio, and so on. Because what the Supreme Court has said in this instance, to say that the act of the central bank redesigning currency itself is illegal fundamentally, because maybe they did not carry some people along. It's against the CBN Act, which says that only the president should be carried along. Okay. Or that the president did not consult people. Now, that raises the issue of who does the president consult? And to what extent? What does consultation mean? And how long does that consultation have to go on? Okay, Mr. Now, whereas what has happened is that the implementation of the policy itself has been very painful and indeed cannot be, if you like, cannot be justified in terms of the pains it has given that are brought on people. But we also have to look at the long-term implications of the
Mr. Fashua,
sorry, of the
can you put a pause, please? We have other guests. Thank you. We've since been joined by Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, Fiscal Policy Partner and Africa Tax Leader at PwC. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You've been listening to our conversation for a bit now.
And following the Naira issue, particularly that part.
Yes.
Do you have any new Naira in your pocket?
I had 20-something thousand I withdrew about, I think 2 or 3 months ago. Then it wasn't as difficult, and I refused to spend it. I think I still have about 12,000 of it now.
Let's be serious now. But it has helped us to save, hasn't it, Mr. Ridley?
I don't think that is, savings has to be something that you do voluntarily, right? if what has happened is you have Naira and you're afraid of spending it, that's not good saving. Because that saving is not even available for investment by other people, because the 12,000 I have now is just in my pocket somewhere in the house, right? Okay. So that's not the type of saving I want us to encourage.
Okay. That's by the way. Okay, the Apex Court, which is what we're talking about, this Supreme Court ruling that those denominations, 200, 500, and 1,000, should remain in circulation until December, the end of the year. And Mr. Fashua now tells us that the central bank says they have destroyed all the ones that they collected. So where does that leave us?
Interesting development, actually. So on one hand, if you recognize the fact that of the denominations, 1,000 and 500 constitute over 80% of the currency in circulation.
Okay.
Right? 100 and 500.
Sorry, 1,000. 1,000.
Yes. Yeah. The two biggest constitute over 80% of the value of the currency in circulation, which is why what the president said earlier on about 200 Naira did not solve the problem, because the value of 200 Naira, old and new, in circulation is not sufficient to address the gap that we have created. That's number one thing. The second thing is that the central bank said to us that out of 3.2 trillion in circulation, which, by the way, according to my analysis, is one of the lowest in the world, if you calculate it as a percentage of GDP or even per capita, it's only about 16,000 per person.
200 million people.
Yes. So they said they've withdrawn about 2.5 trillion.
2.7?
2.7, okay. Yes. So you have about 5 billion.
500 billion.
Yeah, 500 billion in circulation of the old. So if they have destroyed the 2.7 withdrawn, then this judgment of the Supreme Court, in my view, has very little or no effect. Because I do not envisage the central bank going ahead to print the old notes. They can as well just go ahead and print more of the new notes. And by the way, for the, I think, those who have a bit of old Naira are mostly poor people in rural areas. And then the people with illicit funds, right? That's the way I categorize the people who still have the old currency, especially in sizable amounts. So what I think government needs to do is to say, if you see when the president read that speech, some of the objectives that were highlighted were quite interesting, right? So there was one about monetary control. The money is outside of the banking system. We can't control it. I disagree. Because if you're looking at money supply of over 52 trillion naira, and the currency component of it is only about 3 trillion, then that percentage is too small to be the problem that we have. Then you also want...
Okay. Mr. Fashua, so I know that the central bank did, the Supreme Court gave a ruling, I think about 2 weeks ago, and that was not obeyed by the federal government or its agency, the central bank. But this one now that says that those 3 denominations will be in circulation until December this year. Do you see the central bank or the federal government obeying that ruling?
Well, okay, I think that the decision 2 weeks ago and the reaction of the president, especially the president, to that ruling was kind of mishandled, if you ask me. Given that maybe, as Ayo has said, even though I can't see anybody on screen here, so I hope the guys in Abuja will help. So as I think Ayo said that, you know, the president actually represents the federal government. Every parastatal agencies under the presidency can therefore, you know, the president is the go-to person, which is what underlies the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court in this instance. So in that instance, I think that it could probably have been better handled rather than just ignoring it or making another pronouncement, which has been said to also usurp the authorities and the functions of the central bank. I think that this time around, this policy may be, will be, you know, obeyed. But to the extent that what we're hearing before the president made a pronouncement on 200 naira was that the central bank had fully destroyed all the 500 and 1,000 naira, the old one, and so on and so forth, and therefore that the money they have put out now is what they have. Whether we're going to see a difference in what is obtaining presently is a different ballgame entirely. But I think that also what we're hoping is that elections being over, and given all the rhetoric we've heard about some politicians have grabbed all the money that they printed and all of that, we are hoping that people will continue to spend and that the money that have been pushed out will come back into circulation. I'm also hoping, personally, that the central bank will do everything that it can to ensure that the pains of the people are eased up, because this is a very, very interesting, if you like, scenario for most Nigerians who've never had to deal with something like this. You know, it's kind of a shock therapy to everybody that you'd have to queue up to get your funds in the bank and so on. However, the Supreme Court judgment this time around has several implications for monetary policy. Indeed, I actually do agree that the Supreme Court can intervene, especially as a matter of you know, public policy, as a matter of safety. You know, if people start to go around to destroy bank branches and there are millions of people trying to get their money and they can't, of course the Supreme Court can intervene. To what extent it can intervene, that's another you know, ballgame entirely. The Section 19 and 20 of the CBN Act clearly gives, you know, says what should happen in this instance of currency management. Section 19, you know, 1A and B, subsections A, B, actually says and repeated that the president is the final arbiter in the matter of currency redesign and what have you. And Section 20 as well does confirm that subsection C that, you know, that the president can give the central bank instruction to actually take a few currencies out of being legal tenders, given a certain reasonable notice. The question then becomes, what is reasonable notice? And so on and so forth. Now, but in the judgment that the Supreme Court has given now, have they invalidated or vitiated the CBN Act? That's the issue. To the extent that even on matters of mere monetary policy, if the central bank does not get the Supreme Court's, approval, or maybe they might not be able to move on in matters of interest rate setting, monetary policy rate, cash reserve ratio, liquidity ratio, and so on. Because what the Supreme Court has said in this instance, to say that the act of the central bank redesigning currency itself is illegal fundamentally, because maybe they did not carry some people along. It's against the CBN Act, which says that only the president should be carried along. Okay. Or that the president did not consult people. Now, that raises the issue of who does the president consult? And to what extent? What does consultation mean? And how long does that consultation have to go on?
Okay, Mr.
Now, whereas what has happened is that the implementation of the policy itself has been very painful and indeed cannot be, if you like, cannot be justified in terms of the pains it has given that are brought on people. But we also have to look at the long-term implications of the
Mr. Fashua,
sorry, of the
can you put a pause, please? We have other guests. Thank you. We've since been joined by Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, Fiscal Policy Partner and Africa Tax Leader at PwC. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You've been listening to our conversation for a bit now.
And following the Naira issue, particularly that part.
Yes.
Do you have any new Naira in your pocket?
I had 20-something thousand I withdrew about, I think 2 or 3 months ago. Then it wasn't as difficult, and I refused to spend it. I think I still have about 12,000 of it now.
Let's be serious now. But it has helped us to save, hasn't it, Mr. Ridley?
I don't think that is, savings has to be something that you do voluntarily, right? if what has happened is you have Naira and you're afraid of spending it, that's not good saving. Because that saving is not even available for investment by other people, because the 12,000 I have now is just in my pocket somewhere in the house, right?
Okay.
So that's not the type of saving I want us to encourage.
Okay. That's by the way. Okay, the Apex Court, which is what we're talking about, this Supreme Court ruling that those denominations, 200, 500, and 1,000, should remain in circulation until December, the end of the year. And Mr. Fashua now tells us that the central bank says they have destroyed all the ones that they collected. So where does that leave us?
Interesting development, actually. So on one hand, if you recognize the fact that of the denominations, 1,000 and 500 constitute over 80% of the currency in circulation.
Okay.
Right? 100
and 500.
Sorry, 1,000.
1,000.
Yes.
Yeah.
The two biggest ones constitute over 80% of the value of the currency in circulation, which is why what the president said earlier on about 200 Naira did not solve the problem, because the value of 200 Naira, old and new, in circulation is not sufficient to address the gap that we have created. That's number one thing. The second thing is that the central bank said to us that out of 3.2 trillion in circulation, which, by the way, according to my analysis, is one of the lowest in the world, if you calculate it as a percentage of GDP or even per capita, it's only about 16,000 per person.
200 million people.
Yes. So they said they've withdrawn about 2.5 trillion.
2.7?
2.7, okay. Yes. So you have about 5 billion.
500 billion.
Yeah, 500 billion in circulation of the old. So if they have destroyed the 2.7 withdrawn, then this judgment of the Supreme Court, in my view, has very little or no effect. Because I do not envisage the central bank going ahead to print the old notes. They can as well just go ahead and print more of the new notes. And by the way, for the, I think, those who have a bit of old Naira are mostly poor people in rural areas. And then the people with illicit funds, right? That's the way I categorize the people who still have the old currency, especially in sizable amounts. So what I think government needs to do is to say, if you see when the president read that speech, some of the objectives that were highlighted were quite interesting, right? So there was one about monetary control. The money is outside of the banking system. We can't control it. I disagree. Because if you're looking at money supply of over 52 trillion naira, and the currency component of it is only about 3 trillion, then that percentage is too small to be the problem that we have. Then you also want to control inflation. I don't see how this is helping with inflation, right? There's exchange rates.
In fact, it's fueled it more because things are more expensive.
Yeah, because now even when you pay 1,000, one of my partners was saying to me that he wanted to go and cut his hair, and the barber said, "Oh, guy, you paying in cash." So why you ask? He said, if it's cash, it's 1,000 naira. If you're doing transfer, it's 1,2. Because as far as he's concerned, your 1,2 is useless until he goes to a POS to cash it out, and he needs to pay about 20%. So
and
he
may
needs
not
to
be able to cash it for 2 weeks.
Exactly. So that meant we had different pricing for different things. And that in itself was fueling inflation. There's also what we call velocity of currency. You know, if I give you 1,000 and you give to my friend, so that speed of moving around has slowed down because anybody that has it now is trying to keep the little that they have.
Like you.
Like me. And what that means, unfortunately, is that not only would they affect the economic growth, it will disproportionately affect the people at the bottom of the ladder. Because those are the guys who heavily depend on that exchange of physical money to carry out their activities.
Mr. Idile, let's assume that what Mr. Fashua said is correct, that the CBN has indeed taken out the old notes out of existence. What's your best guess, given if such a thing has happened anywhere else in the world before? What's your best guess of likely options for us as a nation and as a people within the next 1 month to 2 months and beyond?
That's a good question. So before the redesign and the scarcity that we created, the amount of currency we really needed was less than 3 trillion because of the 3.2 trillion, about 500 billion was within the banking vault, right? Money with banks is of no value, right? Because for them, they create value when they give it out. Yeah. When they have to keep cash in their vault, it's not adding value. Then you have cash in the CBN.
My apologies. Is this fact you just mentioned now of money being valueless in the bank vaults, is it unknown to the CBN?
It's known to everybody. It's known to the banks. It's known to the CBN.
So
which is why I sometimes find it funny when you say the currency in circulation is outside of the banking system. You don't print currency so they can see it in bank vaults, right? So you can't create credit with that. You can't do anything with it. So it's actually meant to be outside of the banking system and circulate around. But if you think about the currency in bank vaults and the one in the vault of the CBN, together with what they have already circulated, unfortunately, before the currency redesign and scarcity, what we needed was less than 3 trillion. But because of the way we've mismanaged this redesign, even IMF has said that what we now need is going to be more than 4 trillion.
Whoa.
Right? At least in the short term. In the next few months, nobody will get cash and quickly spend it. People will be getting and keeping and getting. In fact, some people we're even saying we're trying to promote financial inclusion and banking. But incidentally, what we're beginning to see is some people are saying, why should I even maintain a bank account when I cannot access the money I have there?
When I need it.
We may end up unbanking the banked instead of banking the unbanked. So that problem, we need to prepare for it. So therefore, I don't know of any country where they've done it this way. What India did was close, but not exactly the same. India removed their highest 2 denominations, and they said, they call it demonetization. It didn't work. It had a lot. In fact, people died, poor people suffered. At the end of the day, fast forward, the currency in circulation increased, even after the whole thing. They even ended up themselves not only returning the 2 highest denominations, they printed a higher denomination of 2,000 that they didn't have previously, right? So, but I do think that it shouldn't be that complicated for us to print our, it's not dollars yet, it's Naira.
Well,
if you want to print the new ones, it shouldn't take you one year
we'll
to
have
do
to speak
that.
with NSPMC because they also have their, from my understanding, there is a relationship between the CBN and the NSPMC, which is annually. And so whatever is needed would have been pre-planned well ahead. But, you know, I guess we'll have to wait for them to have that conversation. But
yeah. Dr. Adeye, the Supreme Court nullified the federal government's Naira Redesign policy, declaring it an affront to the Constitution. Please, can you interpret that to the layman like us here?
Okay.
Nullified.
Yes. If you look at every judgment, you don't read the content of judgment in piecemeal. You have to go back. There are some statements that we call obiter dicta, just a statement by the way. Now, when you say nullified, and then you now get to the conclusion of the judgment, it says that old Naira note 1,200, 500 and 200 should remain till 31st December. So that negates the nullification you refer to. So what the court is trying to say is that the implementation was wrong. Now, back to what Taiwo was mentioning the other time. Let me speak as an accountant now. You know, I've been talking as a lawyer. The way out, what the central bank has done, Taiwo was referring to illicit fund and funds with money with poor people.
Yeah.
The poor people don't even have money now. They don't have. People come to my office asking for 1,000. Yesterday, I had to look for 2,000 to give somebody, a big person. So what is, the Supreme Court is saying is that the central bank has come to tell us that the printer of the new notes, when they made this demand, eventually the president, I think, changed who is to print. So NSPMC printed. But the capacity of NSPMC is not
limited.
enough to cater for what we need, especially the redesign notes.
Yeah.
But the old notes is probably easier for them to print. So the question now is, the CBN has to sit down. Which one is going to be easy for us to print and make funds available to the public? But the more you print the old note, the more you create problem for yourself, because you still want to withdraw it back latest by 31st December. But in the short term, to solve our problem, because right now the 3.2 trillion that the CBN talks about, the volume of cash in circulation, when you look at transactions that is being done in the country, you are talking of over 50 trillion or so. And so 3.2 was just small amount.
Drop in the ocean.
Yes, out of it. So what they need to do now is to say, which one can we make available to the people? Because
Fast. Yes.
Because right now, just like what Taiwo was referring to, that nobody wants to take money to the bank. On Friday, a bank manager told me that they don't open on time because they don't have cash to give customers. Then another bank manager who just retired from the bank had been trying to collect money from Monday till Friday. He couldn't get it. I don't want to mention the names of the bank. Chief Clerk, SAN,
Yes.
bought 100,000 for 125,000
yes.
2 times. And I know a former Minister of Finance who also bought 40,000, 20,000 with 40,000.
Double.
Check. So that is the kind of stress that is in the country. So what the CBN need to come and tell us now is to say, the Supreme Court has given judgment. And for you to say you are not going to comply with the judgment, you will be committing contempt of court. So if the aggrieved party goes back to the Supreme Court that, look, we don't have the money in circulation. They have refused to make it available in the banks. then that is contempt of court. So what the CBN need to tell us is, where are we going to get this money available in the banks? Because all businesses are now in crisis.
Yeah.
Supermarkets, you see queue, not because there are too many people to buy stuff, but you want to make transfer, this person want to make, and then the traffic on the bandwidth, on the network of banks is so high because you want to transfer 1,500. Before now, such transactions are not being dealt with online. You use cash to do them. And then even somebody in the village, a poor person, is trying to make payment of 1,500 and is being taught this is how to do it, and this is wasting our time. So the CBN should tell us where and when, quickly, beginning from Monday.
I went to buy
you want to go to the bank and make sure that money is available.
I went to buy petrol yesterday, and I was told that, you know, we had to pay either cash, or if we were paying with our cards, we had to come and pay the money first before the tanks would be filled. So I asked the question, suppose I say my tank needs 10,000 and it only needs 8, what happens? They say, madam, we have no cash to give you refund. So if you pay 10 and your car only takes 8, it means you don't dash us 2,000 naira.
Well, Mr. Fashua, speak to me. I don't even know, because that issue is not new. I had the same experience, only I was able to get old cash at the time. And yes, Mr. Oedele, you are right. Whoever has cash now doesn't want to release it. Mr. Fashua.
Cash is king.
Mr. Oedele, Mr. Adeoye, beg your pardon, just said something now about digital transactions, which according to NIBS has increased astronomically over the years. In fact, there's data somewhere that says digital transactions have increased by more than 300% as a result of all of these. Oof. That has been a challenge, and in fact, that is one of the things that made the whole issue really cumbersome for a number of people, because there are transactions you have and you don't get confirmation of that transaction for days on end.
Oh, yes.
What would you be proposing now, given the revelation you just gave us that we may not even have the old cash to revert to now, and digital transactions are as difficult? What would be your own immediate recommendation to us as a nation?
Well, you know what, I personally believe that there's no problem that's too difficult to solve if people would gather around, you know, a boardroom table and truthfully brainstorm on solutions. Something will come up. It is clear that, of course, one of the things is that no matter how bad this policy is, there's been a few gains. Perhaps notably that I think that people have designed a new way of spraying money in parties, which will not negate the Constitution, stamping on the Naira and all of that. You know, perhaps we should commend ourselves for that innovation. But also, people have also taken up digital banking more than before, as per necessity, even though it seems like they are being forced to do it, and it's always not good to force people to have to take a decision. And indeed, I think as Mr. Oedele has said there, that you know, so all of a sudden, the cash that we're trying to de-emphasize has become even more important and more precious. People are holding on to what they have, which is also a big problem in society. So digitization, in fact, this morning I was trying to send some money. Since about 2 days ago, I had to wake up at 3 a.m. today to be able to do some USSD transfers. However, it must be said that most of the banks are doing better. POS transactions seem to be improving, but other channels on e-banking, they are not improving. So I would expect that in the coming days, perhaps maybe the president, he had apologized a couple of days back. The president did apologize for this policy and said that, you know what, it wasn't meant to cause pains for the people. And of course, it was his idea, I think, to try and use the policy to target politicians. And we know that what kind of effect that may have had on the presidential elections, on his own party in particular. It would have been deleterious for them. But that is behind us now. So now is the point for everybody to come on board. What I think this judgment clearly says, and which is actionable now, is that anybody that has the old currency should please bring them into circulation and spend. And I think maybe that will provide some reprieve while the central bank then looks at whatever options it can find within its own purview and capabilities. And even if we have to print abroad, if we could be done in a short notice, why not? Or perhaps we have to go back. And then, of course, I understand that with the effluxion of time, even the capabilities of the printing and minting can kick back in. They only need some time to be able to go back and restart their processes. So I think that at this stage, again, we have to then talk about the banks as well. I said this somewhere yesterday that our banks are very enterprising. We are exporting banking to the entire Africa. Nigerian banks are everywhere from Uganda to Rwanda to Kenya, down the whole of West Africa, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Ghana, and co, even into the UK, into US, into Dubai. But how can we have this kind of huge problem with the unbanked, and yet we're exporting banking? I think, like someone said a long time ago, Nigeria is a country that exports what it does not have, and imports what it has. So I think the banks must invest some more. They're going to need some time, but they need to invest some of the huge profits they declare to expand their capacity, especially for electronic banking, because this also showed that there's lack of capacity in that regard. And of course, we cannot afford to leave our rural areas behind permanently. If, for example, we realize that only about 400 local government out of 774 in Nigeria have no bank branches whatsoever. A lot of them closed down as a result of insecurity, and of course armed robberies and so on, or lack of profitability in those places. There must be another model. And of course, we are now at that epoch where we have to redesign banking infrastructure in Nigeria to say, how do we take care of those people, those markets in those rural areas? I mean, someone was with someone who a couple of days back was saying in his local government in Benue State, comparison about 3 or 4 towns, no bank. And they have 3 huge markets there, including a federal polytechnic in Benue State, no bank. You have to travel that long. We have to look at the cost of doing transactions. Therefore, if we're going to be talking about digital, apart from the banks investing better in digital platforms, and also I would want them to consider, the central bank to consider the impacts on job deletions, the fact that a lot of people are going to be sacked even more than have been sacked before, and it's just going to be the computers and the bank MDs and their executive directors and the robots and co. But that being the case, something must be done to take care of the rural people. Are we going to have something like banking hubs in local governments where people who have done digital transactions in those areas can come and make inquiries if they have problems, if they've spent money, if they've transferred money and the monies have disappeared into the ether, somewhere they can interact, because they still need to be able to interact with human beings, especially given the level of illiteracy in those places. We have to pity them. And indeed, rather than leave them in the lodge, we're thinking about how can we ensure that the productivity that needs to be unleashed in those local government areas from the farmers, the small people and all of that, is actually unleashed. And lastly, I will say that as I think maybe the doctor there has said, and I'm also a doctor, but you guys keep forgetting, but as he has said,
sorry.
The small people need to be taken care of, and those are the people that are really, really impacted by this. Even the tipping economy. In the US, it is legal to tip. They would even take the tip from you up front, whether you give them or not. In Nigeria, they say it's corruption. It's not necessarily corruption. Those little people we have to give small money, our family members, people who are sick, that are on their, in the hospitals, those small people, the beggars on the streets and so on, we can't shut them out entirely, and therefore something needs to be done about that. And I think that the fact that this hasn't been quite well implemented is why it became a Supreme Court issue. But also, I think that we may be able to come out of this stronger with a better financial system than before.
Okay. Mr. Yedele, Dr. Fashua.
Yes,
raised the issue of the digital platforms, and he says that the bank needs to invest in that. But it's not strictly a banking issue, is it? it's also a telecommunications issue. So how should the banks handle this?
I agree with you. I think it's even more of a telecommunication infrastructure more than banks. In Kenya, this is a global success story with M-Pesa. And I lived in Kenya before, and last time I was there last year, I wanted to buy a book by the roadside. And the woman said, "Where's my M-Pesa?" So I had to go and, just out of that curiosity, I had to go and register for M-Pesa. All I needed to do, I didn't need a bank account. I went to a telco, any of their telecommunications, got a SIM card, which was free. And immediately, I think it took less than 5 minutes to set it up. And I decided how much I wanted to put in my M-Pesa. And I went and paid for the book. After paying for that book, everything else I did, I used the M-Pesa. Every single person, whether in the village or in the city, they don't have to be educated, can use M-Pesa. Why can't we do it in Nigeria? Why does it have to be banks doing everything?
That's the question I want to ask you.
And this is such a fantastic opportunity. And you know what? You don't need a smartphone for M-Pesa. You don't need a smartphone at all. Why can't we use this opportunity to allow our people to benefit from something like that? That's the best way to do financial inclusion in an environment like Nigeria.
All you need is your phone number.
All you need is just a phone. It doesn't have to be smart. That's all.
What's interesting in this, you continue, so you did.
Yes.
What's interesting is that while we have had, Dr. Ade, transactions that have stalled for days, weeks, I went to make a purchase in Ikeja. I had made a purchase elsewhere and I waited for quite a while. But I went to this shop and I made a purchase. For God's sake. The moment I received my alert, they received their alert.
Yes, that's
and what happened? They used a phone number for the transaction. Buttressing what so it's something we already have. We only need to scale it up, right?
Exactly, and it's more reliable. So that way, once you bring people into the banking financial system, not banking really, one, you get the data, you get the advantage, and then you solve a lot of this problem. But in the meantime as well, I do think that we have to approach this as a national emergency. So someone has to sit down, most likely that has to be the central bank, and say who and who is involved. Banks, telcos, other infrastructure providers, POS, so that whatever limited resources we have now, I think we have to prioritize this currency matter. So if your bandwidth, for example, I'm not using a layman explanation, is 100, and you need 90 for this currency, allocate it there. Let's manage the 10 for whatever is left. Because this is a problem that if you try and address it, and people see that progressively it's going away as a problem over the next few weeks, the system will take care of itself, and it will give the central bank enough time to print the additional currency that we do need.
We're running off now, but I'd like to take each your comments on this one thing, so let's close with that. The important thing now is communicating. Mr. Udile has made it clear that rather than bank the unbanked, we are unbanking the banked with this policy so far. How do we communicate whatever it is from the CBN, the federal government, whoever, to ensure that the trust in the system leaps, even though marginally?
The first thing is that the leaders, those that are entrusted with managing agencies of government, they need to become humble in the first place and know that you are called to serve. And I'm glad that this is happening in the month of March 2023. Exactly March 1958, the central bank was established. That's 65 years ago. And this judgment is coming in March. And there have been review of CBN Act 6 times. You had it in 1991, you had 1993, 1997, 1998, and 1999, and then 2007. So all of us, we need to sit down in a round table and call a spade a spade. There is problem in the society because you hear the objective for this redesign. It doesn't even align with the responsibility of the central bank. Security issue, ransom collection, and all of those things. If you look at Section 2 of the CBN Act, 2007, what the core mandate of the central bank is out of all of this security issue. The security people should handle that. So we all need to sit down and say, we are creating more problem for our people. And say, how do we make sure, like using telephone, all this Palm Pay and whatever, you get instant alert. Supermarkets are now leaving banking platform, and now with all of these entities.
My takeaway from what you've said so far is that they need to be humble.
Yes.
Mr. Dr. Fashua.
Humble pie coming up.
You can't just be arrogant and just say, I will do whatever I like. No.
Dr. Fashua, 1 minute. How do we communicate the immediate solutions or whatever it is to Nigerians to help boost confidence again?
I think that's what you're doing exactly on this program right now, communicating solutions, and we have to do more of this. I quickly will say that the role of central banks have changed over time, and maybe the Supreme Court's judgment and their pronouncement actually shows that they're a little bit behind time in terms of the evolution of central banking. You know, things like money laundering and so on, fighting corruption, it's a big global issue, especially since September 2001, when the bombing happened in the US, the Twin Tower thing. It changed the game entirely. And you don't want to be a renegade country and say your financial system is just going on its own direction. They call you back to order. They'll label you. They'll freeze you. In Iran is suffering one of those things now because of the problems with the United States. We can't be a pariah country in that regard, number one. Number two, to echo Mr. Yedele, Momo. Nigeria has licensed payment service bank. If all our telecoms, big telecoms companies are banks as it is right now today. I don't see why. I think that, I don't know, someone dropped the ball and those guys haven't kicked in. With the pervasiveness of our telephone companies, our rural people should not even be having problems.
Okay.
We should, and the learning curve also should be a bit shorter. If those guys actually do what they need to do. I don't know what the issues are, but everywhere else in Africa, the phone companies are taking a bigger role. So they are just leveraging on what M-Pesa achieved in Kenya. Go to Rwanda and all of that now.
Essentially, you are saying, Dr. Fashua, that we already have these templates. We should just scale them up. Thank you so much. Mr. Idele, how do we communicate to people so trust does not crumble completely?
Yeah, trust is end. So, and it starts from being sincere. So you have to relook at the objectives you've communicated. Be honest. Don't tell them, because people can tell when you are not being honest and you can't win their trust. And then number two, you need to acknowledge that you've made a mistake and apologize. It's not too big, right?
Humble pie.
Yes. And then beyond that, tell them the solution that you have. Stop blaming banks because they will keep burning down banks.
Yes.
So we need to not make a bad situation worse and be sincere with ourselves.
Okay.
Humble, scale up, sincere, tell the truth.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We have been chatting with Dr. Tokwe Fashua, an economist who joined us from our studio in Abuja, as well as Dr. Lugbenga Adeoye, who is a lawyer and a chartered accountant, as well as Mr. You better go and do something about that.
No, that would be all right.
Associate professor.
Doctor.
No,
Associate Professor Taiwo Oyedele, Fiscal Policy Partner and Africa Tax Leader at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thank you all very much for coming to join us this morning and airing your views about this very, very important matter.
And for being honest and humble. When you hear wildlife, what comes to mind? Please don't tell me bushmeat. Please.
Dr. Noja will not be very happy with you if your answer is bushmeat.
Because 1 in 5 people rely on wild species for income and food. while 2.4 billion people depend on wood, fuel, for cooking. So March,
Still.
yeah. Today, we observed the world, no, okay, that was yesterday, right?
That was yesterday, yes.
That was yesterday. We observed the World Wildlife Day, WWD, a UN International Day celebrating the world's wild animals and plants and their contributions to our livelihoods and the health of Mother Earth. Let's have this conversation this morning with Dr. Joseph Onoja, who is Director General, Nigerian Conservation Foundation. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're going to Abuja shortly, but let's start with that thing. Do you think people understand wildlife beyond bushmeat?
Yeah, people do. They do. I would say they do because we all know apart from the consumptive value of the animals that we have around us, people also know their intrinsic value and their use value as well, because they play a very significant role for us. It's just that these days we have a lot of selfishness and greed, which has led to where we are today. Because even in those days, hunters used to have hunters' code, and I'm sure you've had hunting seasons. And even if it's the riverine communities, you have fishing seasons. And that's because there are times whereby these wild animals breed and you allow them time to be able to breed. Because if you harvest them during their breeding season, the tendency is that you harvest pregnant females and young ones. But when you have open season for hunting, that's when you allow for the matured ones, the ones that can be taken out. So in the olden times, people have already been practicing sustainable harvesting, and that is one of their ways of doing it. So it's not really a new phenomenon. But it came to a time whereby our greed superseded our reasoning in terms of trying to protect these animals, and then we went harvesting them such that, in fact, there was one time I was in Liberia, and they used to have, the hunters used to have a code, but after the war, they now broke, everybody became a hunter, and they had this saying that no baby on target, that is, you clear anything you see, anything at all that you see, probably be it pregnant female, as long as an animal. So people lost that code, that sense of responsibility to our animals. People lose them, and then we started killing them. And we now drove the population of these wild animals to the level that they become endangered. And because of that, that is why now it became a problem for us to start thinking about animals who are endangered, and then we start talking about bushmeat. If not, before now, the only source of protein for local communities and communities living around protected areas or wild areas are this what we call bushmeat. That's their only source of protein. But we got to a point whereby their harvest is no longer sustainable. And down the line, it's exposing them, their communities, to extinction, because they will not have that source if we continue at this rate.
But bushmeat refers to a whole load of
Yes, that means different
flesh from animals.
Yes, so yeah, so the different flesh from animals and different species as well, and then we just harvest them without recourse to what is their status and the role they play.
Do people eat pangolins?
Yeah, people eat pangolins. Yeah.
Okay.
Pangolins.
Okay. We've since been joined by Ms. Folusho Ajayi, Team Lead for Wildlife, UNODC. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
First of all, tell us what UNODC means.
It's the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime.
Office for?
Drugs and crime.
Drugs and crime. Okay, thank you. Now, we heard that a total of 1,613 tons of pangolin scales meant for export was seized by customs in February. Pangolin scales. So these people take the scales for export and then eat the flesh. Is that correct?
Well, we don't really know what they use the flesh for. Some people eat the flesh, as Joseph mentioned. pangolins is consumed as bushmeat in Nigeria locally. But for the various reasons, we don't really have the data on what they use the flesh for after they've harvested the scales of these pangolins.
Okay, pangolins are now on the list of endangered species, am I correct? What other animals are on that list? Is it a long list, by the way? Endangered species in Nigeria. Sorry? Can you hear me?
Sorry, I lost you. Yeah.
Endangered species in Nigeria. Can you give us some of the major ones?
Well, definitely pangolins is on that list. We also have the African grey parrot, the elephants. We also have the rhino. Rhinos were local to indigenous to Nigeria, but we're seeing the population dwindling. Those are a few of some of the major endangered species in Nigeria.
Now, madam, speaking to your core area of core competence, going by the office from which you came, what are the systems that you see being in place to forestall this risk that we're at of these animals that you said are on the endangered species list?
Okay, for a while, we grappled with weak institutions on the part of the relevant national agencies with a mandate to combat wildlife and forest crime and protect these endangered species. Weak in the sense that there wasn't real capacity for them to fulfill their mandate. Also, porous borders. Nigeria is blessed with having one of the more advanced border infrastructure in the African region. And of course, criminals will take advantage where they see loopholes in the system. But one thing that we've noticed, that we've seen in the past couple of years, is that Nigeria is actually rising up to its responsibilities. One important tool which was developed and launched last year was the first national strategy to combat wildlife and forest crime in Nigeria, 2022 to 2026. Now, this is an important tool for Nigeria to tackle wildlife crime because it charts a roadmap for Nigeria. It sets out certain strategic objectives which Nigeria needs to implement to eradicate or drastically reduce wildlife crime. So that's one critical tool that has been developed by Nigeria, and UNODC supported that process. Joseph, I'm happy to see he's in the studio. He was also part of the development of that national strategy.
Well, we understand that the illicit wildlife business is a multi-million naira business.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's a business that's not supposed to be.
Yep.
Okay, so how do we ensure? Because, I asked about people's understanding beyond bushmeat.
Yeah.
I asked that because this is the idea. At the end of the day, you travel on major highways all over the country, you see people marketing wildlife along the roads and all of that. So in terms of education, in terms of enlightenment, what do people need to know, especially who are in modern Nigeria, that can communicate to rural Nigeria so that they can also be a part of the process of ensuring the preservation of these things? Are people aware of the risks that will come to them if these wildlife go extinct?
All right, so the education, there are different approaches to all of this. Number one is enforcement. The other part is education. The other part is for closely linked to education is enforcement of the laws, of the extant laws. And then we have the education closely linked to that is the awareness. People need to be aware and also you have collaboration. So when I talk about education, yeah, there's need for enlightenment, and that's why a day like the World Wildlife Day was set aside, so that people will know the importance of these wildlife. So you don't just see them as, because sometimes as humans we have these egoistic tendencies to think that everything, the world is around us. we need to see ourselves as part of it. The world's in the balance. And if we tamper with that balance, it will eventually affect us first, because we are the most vulnerable of all the wildlife, because they are at home in the environment. For instance, if it's raining now, when you see baboons or you see birds, they just cover themselves and they're at home with it. But if we're exposed to such things, so just elements, we can easily fall sick and even die. So we are most vulnerable. So we need to be aware of that. And once we are aware of that, then we need to be aware of the importance that these wildlife play in their environment and how it affects us. Now we talk about enforcement, on the other hand, is for us also to, the laws to be enforced as it should be. And that's why Felicia talked about the laws, the wildlife and forest crime strategy that was developed. These are some of the things that, some of the instruments that are supposed to be used to be able to empower the agencies whose capacity are those to be able to make that happen. Yeah. Now, you see, I'm relating it because we cannot talk about awareness alone, because even if people are aware of it, there will still be defiance.
That's the thing.
Yes.
Okay, so, but let's at least see how deep-seated, how deep-rooted the awareness goes. In rural Nigeria, what do they know about these things?
Well, I think sometimes we tend to underrate the knowledge of these rural communities because they have local knowledge. And that is why I talked about how they have been doing these things even before now. Yeah. But greed has come on board. And that is where also these things, we have to do it on one hand with the laws as well, the extant laws that make sure that criminalizes all of these things. So when you talk to these local communities, they know, because they are the ones involved in it. When you talk to a hunter, for instance, and you ask him, how long have you seen such and such an animal? He will tell you that, yeah, it's been quite some time. So they know that these things is happening, even though some of them are still very much defiant and say, oh, God will continue to provide. Exactly. But they know, empirical evidence shows that these things are dwindling.
Yes, I know, but do they know the implications or the risk of those things going extinct? That's the question I'm asking.
Yes, on one, they know. Because as I said, they are
more food.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't need anybody to tell you that, oh, before you can just walk 2 kilometers behind your house and you're able to get an animal and come and cook for your family. But these days now you spend 3-4 days in the forest before you come back. And sometimes you come back with a very small, maybe grass cutter instead of an antelope. So they know these things, but we'll continue to create more and more awareness. No, awareness cannot, it's not enough. Yeah. We'll continue to push as much as we can. Okay.
Ms. Ajayi, why is it that the consumption of meats from wild animals has increased over the years? More and more people are eating meat from wild animals. Why is that?
Well, I wouldn't say that the consumption of bush meat or wild meat has necessarily increased over the years. In fact, what we're seeing in the illegal wildlife trade is not so much consumption for killing of these endangered species for consumption. It's mainly for export. Trade. We're seeing these endangered species being exploited for exports to other countries and other continents. And so the real focus and where the real problem isn't so much on consumption, because you can do something about consumption. If it was mainly only consumption, you can ensure that consumption is sustainable by ensuring that, putting measures in place to ensure that as people kill these animals for consumption, it's replaced. But where we're seeing the real problem is in the illegal trafficking and the illegal exploitation of these animals for exploitation to larger markets where these species are really quite lucrative. So that really is where the focus really is at the moment, and that's why awareness is extremely important. And like Joseph mentioned, increasing the awareness of the communities also where these species are being exploited from, helping them to understand how it affects them, how it affects their well-being, how it takes away from their biodiversity, is something that is really important. So that's something that is really quite critical. Awareness is extremely critical. And that's why we celebrate World Wildlife Day every year. We also have International Day of Forest. We celebrated World Pangolin Day a couple of weeks ago. So awareness is extremely important. So just to say, the consumption for people eating it in their homes isn't so much of a problem as much as the exploitation of these animals for export.
Export. Okay. How much cooperation is coming from the Customs Service in this regard?
Could you repeat that? I only heard the later part. You mentioned cooperation.
How much cooperation is coming from the Customs Service in helping to curb the export?
Service really must be commended. In the large-scale seizures we've seen over the past few years, the Nigerian Customs Service has really been front and center of these seizures, and that's also largely because of their presence at these ports. A lot of the seizures are done at the seaports, also seizures on land. So they've really been front and center of the seizures done in Nigeria, and they really must be commended. Of course, there's always room for improvement, ensuring that they're working collaboratively with all the other agencies, such as the National Environmental Standards and Regulations Enforcement Agency in Nigeria, which has an enforcement mandate, working with others like the National Park Service, working with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, because there's a corruption angle to wildlife trafficking, working with the NFIU, Interpol, and all the other bodies. There's always room for improvement, and that's one of the things that UNODC is seeking to ensure that there's collaboration between these agencies so that Nigeria has a more cohesive response to tackling wildlife crime.
So what's the focus this year of this year's World Wildlife Day?
It's about building partnerships, and as Folusho rightly pointed out, it's not something that an agency or an organization can do alone. We must come together to be able to build that partnership, and we saw that very clearly when we're developing the strategy on the combating forest and wildlife, forest crime and the wildlife, because UNODC led that process, and we're able to make that happen. So we must all come together to be able to make that happen. And as Felicia was talking about the export component of wildlife, because it is a multi-billion dollar crime. And it cuts across, it's international. And that is where the consumptive part of the bushmeat is even a smaller part of it. And that's why I say greed came in, because, before they would just go and pick a little, and only during harvest time, and they make that happen. But because they need so much to be able to make tons, to be able to export, and that is that's what happens. And for the pangolin, the meat is even one of the most less valuable things among all of it, because now pangolin is the most is the most traded in mammal species that we know about. And then we talk about elephant tusk. You want to kill a whole elephant that has lived 30 to 60 years to develop the tusk, and you just pick that tusk alone, and that's what you are. That's what you're exporting. And then you talk about even for timber as well. Some of the timber that are endangered, that has been exported illegally, and so on. And then the government does not get the that's for the timber. The government doesn't get the revenue that's supposed to accrue to them, and that is where the World Wildlife Day comes in, because it's stemming in from CITES, which is the convention, the UN Convention on International Trade on Endangered Species of Flora and Fauna, because we recognize that there's some form of trade that should happen with this because of the value that they provide. But there are endangered species that are regulated, that this trade should not be, we should not have trade on some of these species.
Dr. Onoja, the Conservation Foundation has been among those who are really undertaking awareness about all these things. And you have been on our program several times to talk about all this. How much success are you seeing from all the work that the conservation is, and agencies such as Ms. Ajayi's? How much results are you achieving from all of that?
Yeah, so I must say that we are making some progress, but howbeit slow. We're hoping to see a faster adoption of these messages by the populace, and especially now that it's kind of twinned with climate change, because we have biodiversity loss and climate change issues all coming together, because they are two sides of the same coin. And then people are beginning to see the practical effect of some of these things. So people are beginning to imbibe that message. But for Nigeria, I must say, it's slow. Partly because of the greed, and then because when we start talking, oh, how do you want people to survive? Oh, people depend on these animals to feed. But there are other alternatives, and that's why we tried. And it has to do with behavior as well. And then moving people from one behavior to another, is a very challenging thing. So some will tell them that, oh, if I don't eat bushmeat, I don't feel like eating anything, and things like that. And sometimes the annoying, the disappointing, and the depressing part of it all is that the hunters who are involved in this don't get as much value from what they do. You find out that the middlemen and the people in the market are eventually the ones who even get much more value. And then the local communities have lost it twice, because they have lost the intrinsic value of those wildlife to their community and the services they provide in these communities. And also they've lost it in terms of even the monetary value, because they're not getting as much value for these animals as they should have ordinarily
gotten. Which is the question that I was asking you the other time about the impact. I mean, if these wildlife are supposed to contribute anything to the environment, are the locals aware? But we'll come to that hopefully before the end of today. But let me ask you, Mr. Jai, Dr. Onoja talked about partnerships as the focus of this year's conversation around the World Wildlife Day. What kind of partnerships are we looking at? I know government has a role, but even then, I mean, we look at the local government level, the state government level, the federal government level, and international partnerships such as yours. How about private sector participation or private sector partnerships, adoption of some wildlife areas and all of that? What kind of partnerships really are we looking at?
The partnerships covers all the areas you've mentioned. So partnerships between the national agencies, partnerships with civil society organizations and non-governmental organizations, regional partnership, inter-regional partnership, partnerships across board, really, partnerships with private organizations as well. Private organizations can decide to take on board wildlife conservation as some of their CSR initiatives. So really, any kind of partnership is what's welcome, and that's what's being celebrated. And I have to say that we're seeing Nigeria at this time also strengthening its partnerships. Recently, under the leadership of the Federal Ministry of Environment, the Wildlife Enforcement Task Force was inaugurated, and this is a body made up of several national agencies with an enforcement mandate. So we are seeing a culture of the partnership between these agencies, and also working with civil society organizations like Joseph's organization, the Nigerian Conservation Foundation, growing in recent years. But what we also need to step up is interregional and regional partnerships. Wildlife crime is usually transnational. It's not limited to Nigeria. For instance, quite a few of the pangolin scales that have been seized are not from pangolins in Nigeria. We're seeing a transshipment of pangolins and illegal wildlife products being shipped from the West and Central African region using Nigeria's border ports. So partnerships across board is really what's the focus of this year's World Wildlife Day, and strengthening those partnerships for effective enforcement and conservation of these endangered species.
I go back to the question of structures that I asked you earlier, Mr. Jai. Do we have structures to support that partnership? I want to assume that there are some partnerships that have existed from now. I'm aware, for instance, that the NLNG has adopted a particular forest reserve, Finima Nature Park, for instance. So for other corporates or governments, do you think we have the structures to bear those partnerships sustainably?
Yes, to an extent we have those structures, especially when you're talking about private organizations being involved in conservation. But one key structure that is quite lacking is the legal framework. We need to strengthen the legal framework in particular. There was an interesting case which was celebrated because it was one of the first convictions in a long time, in September last year, when a foreign national was convicted for trafficking 200 kilograms of pangolin scales. However, he was convicted to sentenced to 3 months imprisonment.
Only?
So we see there's a weakness in the laws, and where sometimes the sentencing doesn't match, the crime, for 200 kilograms of pangolin scales, and you get 3 months on sentencing. That's like a slap on the wrist, go home and, seen no more. But that's not sustainable, because that doesn't provide a deterrent effect. So one key structure that's missing is the legal framework. I know that the Ministry of Environment is working with several partners to work with the National Assembly to strengthen Nigeria's laws. If we can get it right and elevate wildlife crime to a serious crime with attendant sentencing that provides a deterrent effect, I think, that's one key structure that, if we get that right, we'll see a downwards trend in illegal wildlife trafficking trends.
Dr. Raja.
We have to start winding down now. Yeah. So I want us to close with your advice to Nigerians who cannot live without bushmeat and those who are in the business of trading hides and skins internationally, of trading pangolin scales and whatever else they trade in, that are worth all these billions of naira that I'm looking at. Because we hear that the haul that was, that the customs found last year, February last year, was worth 10 billion naira.
Yeah.
It's not small money.
It is. I mean, it's not, and that's to show you that the scale at which this happens.
The business is
yeah,
yes.
The
scale of the business.
Some of these illegal things move together. It goes with money laundering, it goes with drugs, and it goes with illegal wildlife trade as well.
Yes.
So that is why people who are involved in it, as Felicia rightly pointed out, strengthening the law is something. So the people who are the criminals who are involved in this, the law will soon catch up with them, because as you said, the partnership is working at strengthening the law. The Federal Ministry of Environment is leading that, so that with other partners leading that, to be able to ensure that we have a wildlife law that bites. And when that happens, then we'll see we'll see that reducing. And for those who are involved in eating bushmeat and things like that, we should look at the health implication even to ourselves. We should look at the depriving the environment of the intrinsic value or the functionality of this wildlife, the role that they play in keeping all of us healthy, because it's not just for one person, it's for the whole community, it's for the community, for Nigeria, and for the globe. So we should look at it from that angle, and it's very important we do that.
Okay. Mr. Ajayi, your final word?
Well, same as I will re-echo Joseph's statement. It's important that we're looking at it holistically and not just thinking in a myopic way. We need to understand how wildlife crime affects us all, how it deprives us of the rich biodiversity. Nigeria is so blessed with fantastic biodiversity. So the unsustainable exploitation actually will affect us. It's important that, we're protecting this. Every single creature has its role to play in the ecosystem. Yes. So it's not proper that we see some of them go extinct. For instance, pangolins, they're referred to as the guardians of the forest because they play such an important role in protecting the forest from termites and all of that. So it's important that we work collaboratively. We put aside our selfish interests and protect the rich ecosystem that we've been blessed with. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ms. Felicia Ajayi, Team Lead for Wildlife, UNODC, who joined us from our studio in Abuja. And we had with us in Lagos, Dr. Joseph Onoja, Director General, Nigerian Conservation Foundation. Thank you both for coming to tell us about World Wildlife Day 2023.
Thank you very much for having me.
When we come back, you have teenagers at home. I'm sure they're just...
gentle. Very, very gentle. We'll be right back. We'll be right back. Okay. I don't know, you wanted to talk about that guy. Teenagers is generally gentle.
Which guy?
Gentle, the team.
They're listening to you, and they can see you're saying this tongue in cheek. Baba, you can't mock one now. What's wrong with him?
Well, it's generally believed that the teen years pose some of the most difficult challenges for families, for teenagers themselves, dealing with hormone changes and the ever complex world and elections or a lack of it. Now, you know, they themselves may feel that no one can understand their feelings, especially the parents. So let's get into this conversation with Motolani Falabi, who is a family life coach. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you heard her the other time.
My friend's teenage daughter, who's 14, says to her mother, I'm going through a lot.
She's going through a lot.
Huh?
Oh, is she?
Yeah, she is.
Okay, tell us about that.
You know how we assume that as adults...
She's not paying any bills.
Oh, God.
She's living in a free house. She's eating free food.
Yeah.
But she's going through a lot.
She is.
Okay. All right.
I think that parents tend to forget that these children are also humans. They have a lot of emotions also running through them. You know, I had a conversation with some parents just after the election to say, do not take out the anger of what is happening on your children because they're also hurting. There's a possibility that while all of the activities were going on, you probably didn't even pay attention to them. They didn't feel that you love them, all the words, and they're on social media seeing all the comments and so going on, and you don't think that they're also going through a lot.
That's going through a lot.
You know, yes. So and aside that, sometimes it could be something that has to do with school. Some child not feeling accepted, right? So I've had a conversation with a girl who says that I don't think I am beautiful because nobody had ever told her that she is, and she's a bit, you know, on the big side.
Okay.
Yeah. So she goes to school. Her friends are always, you know, mocking her. Oh, you can't run. You can't do any sport activity. But she's very good with, you know, drawing and anything that has to do with artistics and all. And then, but nobody is seeing the fact that this girl has other abilities, besides the fact that she's, you know, on the big side. But she's not getting that affirmation from home. So she comes home, then any small thing, she has siblings who are also saying, oh, look at how fat you are. And then when she tells you she's going through a lot, it means she's going through a lot. She doesn't feel accepted. She doesn't feel loved.
Going through a lot.
And this is a very important in the life of any child. So you imagine that even as adults, you go out looking all dressed up, and nobody made a single comment about how you feel. I've heard adults even say, oh, what happened? Is it that I'm not...
Good luck to them. They're blind.
I'm not... But of course, these teenagers have not grown that emotionally to be able to say, oh, I don't care what people think about me. I don't care what people see. This is who I am. Because you, the parent, has not even done the job. How well have you, you know, like for me as a teenager growing up, right now I don't feel like anybody is more beautiful than I am. Because I grew up in a house where I'm the only dark person in the house. Every other person is fair because my mom is light too. And then my father tells me every morning that I'm the most beautiful girl in the world. I heard that every morning for so many years, growing up as a child. You cannot tell me otherwise right now. Because somebody had taken his time to say, I know that this lady most likely would be feeling. So say, oh, you are dark like your dad. So when people say, why are you so different from them? I say, yeah, because you're like your dad. You don't need to put too much cream in, you know, or none of this marks. You don't, because for my mom, if you hold her hand too tight, you probably see this reddish, but that doesn't happen with me. But I had somebody who took the responsibility to make me feel comfortable in my skin, to make me feel like I was beautiful enough. So it's important for parents to affirm and confirm their love of their children, no matter how they look. No matter, and make them feel like, because you're responsible for building the esteem of your children.
So the operative word here is feel.
Okay.
That's what you're saying. What you make them feel. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Not even what they do, or you know how errands they get sometimes should affect that.
You know, I work with teenagers a lot, and then when I hear parents say, oh, my child is too lazy, my child does not listen, my child is always on the phone playing games all day, my child is this and that, and I am asking the question, this child was 2 in your house, was 3, was 4, moved through that childhood, you groomed, you modeled who that child has become today. That child didn't fall from heaven. So the values you have not instilled in the child, you don't expect to see it as a teenager. It doesn't work that way. So the work that parents had not put in, they're expecting it from the children. So a father says, oh, my child is very lazy. What do you mean lazy? The child does not do what you want him or her to do as at the time you want him or her to do it. Do you even understand the personality of your child to understand how they... But because as parents, we feel you don't have a say as to when I want you to do what I want you to do, because we don't think that they're humans.
The parents didn't have a say.
Times have changed. That was your generation.
Times have changed.
You need to understand that, see, the world has moved. It's not the children that has moved. It's not the children that have changed. You didn't have the cell phone. You didn't even have whatever was going to distract you as a child. But look at a baby, 6 months, 1 year, because you are busy, you give them the phone. That's the only thing they know how to, that's the only way they know how to engage themselves. So you say your child is stuck on using, but from childhood, from baby, you're giving them phone, they're watching the cartoon, they are stuck to it. You groom them to depend on that device. So why are we acting like these children suddenly just love to use the phone? When you don't want them to disturb you, you hand over that phone to them to keep them busy. Now, because they don't want to stress you or trouble you, they go back to the phone, then you're complaining, and I'm wondering, who bought the phone? Who gave access? Who gave the child that phone? Were you not already teaching that child from childhood that I am busy right now, you can go ahead and play with your phone, and then they get stuck on it, and they were complaining about how they use their phone. Parents, you gave it to them in the first place. We didn't have all the phones. You didn't have a choice than to maybe read or play with anything physical that you can't see. We're not stuck on phones. We had the Starcoms landline in my house. You can't be playing with that. Unless you want just to pick and drop and maybe, you know, phone your little sister who was just somewhere across you. We handed over the phone to them while they were younger. They are now used to it. They figure out, I was talking to some girl some days ago who was hooked on pornography. Said, I was working on my system, and then they had to pop up. I clicked on it, I saw it, and then I was flipping. She didn't go look for it. It popped up as an advert. And majority of the games that we play, you know, I was talking to a teenager and said, even the game that my mom bought for me, and then they gave me some of the names. I'm like, oh, really? He said, yes, there's some porn in there, but our parents are not even aware. So majority of these things, you handed it over to them.
Okay, now, let's talk about this digital space that you just sauntered into now.
Right.
I'd have loved to speak about character formation and all of that, but we'll come to that. The parent is right now divided between weaning them off of these divisive devices, these distracting devices, and really keeping them up to date. Because in the grandmothers of the future are going to be techie.
Yeah. Okay.
There is no way to do without it. Help parents see how to balance giving them the digital nature in which they were born and keeping them within human environments.
So the first thing I would say to parents is before you allow your child out there, because there are millions of information that they would have access to when they go online. But then the question is, what values have you imputed into them before they went on that platform? Because you will not always be there to see whatever it is that they're doing on their device. But the question is, what have you taught them about pornography? What sexual education have you given to them? What have you spoken to them about integrity, about lying, about bullying others? You know, so the child can go online and see. So it's the preparation before that time. Because some children are really techie, and all they wanted to do has to be done online or maybe on their device. But the values that you have imputed into them is what will make them see some things and say, no, I won't do this because I understand that it is not right. I'd had to handle a case of another boy who masturbates a lot, and because, of course, he had seen pornography. And then I was teaching them about the fact that this industry is in business. They're not trying to teach you how to have better sex. And he said, oh, he didn't know. A friend of his had mentioned it to say, oh, if you want to have better sex, because a lot of his is 14. A lot of his friends they already have girlfriends, they're having sex already. So they felt
14.
like, yeah, they're 14. And that if he watches it, it teaches him how. And by the time I was done, and then he came back, he said, it was just a class on that, on pornography. But he came and said, "I want to see you, ma. I'm sure you're going to be very disappointed." I said, "No, I wouldn't be." And then he said, "Oh, I'd watch it a couple of times, but I watch it because of this. But now that you have said this, I was feeling bad because I was thinking it was going to teach me, because I made them realize that. So if you had watched this and you're married in the future and then your wife has not watched, it's going to eventually become a problem." And then he said, "Oh, I didn't see it that way." Now the question is, who are the parents? What have you taught them? To say you don't go online and, insult other people. I see comments, you see things happening online, and some young girl goes in there and bash the adults. What has our parents taught her about respect, whether it's physical or online? So all of these habits that people are taking online, they would have done it even if it's physically. It's in them. So the question is, imbibe values into your children, because you will not always be there with them, so that they are able to make those decisions to whether do this or not do that, even when you're not there.
Now, there's this saying that it takes a village or so to raise
a child. Yeah.
Now,
It sure does.
it's just you.
It sure does.
Now, how about you are the one that gave birth to the child.
Okay.
Parents are sometimes a little too busy in urban Nigeria. That's no excuse. But that is the reality for the parents. Let's talk to parents who right now have children that are quite a handful. How do they begin to navigate back? This session is definitely, we're going to have a list of things we'll take on from time to time, but help us speak to parents who need to navigate back to helping their children, their teenagers and all, balance out all over again.
To say, oh, my child is now a teenager, I can't get hold of this child, where do I start from? Sit down and have conversations. You'll be surprised that they need to be able to trust you again. Parents have not learned to build relationship with their children. We want to bond with our spouses. We want our spouses to love us more. We are more careful about speaking our spouse's love language because we want the marriage to work. What are we doing intentionally with our children to bond with them, to make them feel that we love them? Or we don't think that they also need that? Relationship, I think, is what is most lacking. We give birth to them, we give them every other thing they need, and then out. Do your children really feel that you love you? I speak to majority of these teenagers and they say, I don't think my parents love me. So, but you say, I'm doing a lot, I'm providing. If your child says, I don't think you love me, he or she meant, I don't feel loved. Stop trying to excuse it. Have a conversation with your teenager, with your children, and say, I just learned something new. I'm not sure that I've been doing the best with parenting, but forgive me. I'm doing the best that I can with the knowledge available to me, but now I want to do it better. I don't think that we're close enough. What do I do? The same way we're trying to bond with our partner, we're reading, we're making inquiries, we're even asking our partner, how do you want me to be a better spouse? Do you sit with your children and ask them, what is it that I'm doing that you don't love? What is it that you want me to stop doing? What is it that you want me to start doing? Can we have a me time? Can you sit down when you're having a conversation with your children? Are you on your phone, pressing your phone, making them feel like they're less important, or that whoever it is you're talking to is more important than they are? You need to sit with them and have this conversation to say, I want us to bond. Because it's only in the place of rapport that you can get to know what is happening with them. Someone said, my mom thinks that we are best friends, but I'm just acting along to make her feel. Yeah, my mom thinks that we're best friends, but we're not. And when I told the mother, I asked her, what's your relationship with her? She said, we have a very good one.
We're cool.
Ma, you're far from cool. So I brought them together and say what you said. He said, Mommy, you shout a lot. When I'm trying to have a conversation with you, you're not listening. You're always insulting me. Even when I'm saying the truth, Mommy, you don't believe me. So there's no point. So I do whatever I do. And because you also beat me, I do whatever I want to do because, well, it will always be beaten, and I'm used to the beating anyways. So we are raising children who, they would get to a level where we will not even be able to have a say in their life. Because on what basis? Even as adults right now, there is someone, if you get on a call, say you want to call your dad, as parents right now, you probably still have your own parents. Who do you spend more time with on the phone when you call? Do you spend longer time with your dad, or you spend longer time talking to your mom? That's the person who had invested some level of, you've had that level of relationship which you can confide in. Some people right now, even as adults, cannot confide in their parents because they didn't have that relationship. Now, where you need to start from is sit with your children today and say, I want to be a better parent. What do you want me to do? And then let's discuss it. And it won't be a one-off. It could be once every week to say, okay, so what are we doing this week? Everybody in the family, do they even know what we're trying, the kind of family we're trying to build? To say, as royalties that we have, we don't behave this way. We don't dress this way. We don't do this way. Your children are not even aware of what your family values are. They are not aware of the goal ahead that the family is trying to work towards. So, but then you want them to behave it. I think we have too much expectation of those children when we have not taught them what is expected. So have that conversation. Let them tell you how they feel about your parenting style. And when they give you the feedback, don't keep shouting and say, no, that's not it. I'm doing it. If your child says, Mommy, I don't think you love me, accept that feedback and work on it. And then ask, how then do you want me to love you? A child says, Mommy comes back from work, I'm trying to have a conversation with her. And she says, leave me, I went out all day to work to get money for you. I can't come back now yet. And she's the only girl. She's the only one at home. You go to work, she comes back before you. She's all by herself. She's reading all evening. So you get back and she wants to have a conversation. I understand that parents are really tired. Of course, by the time you go in traffic, you're back, you're exhausted. It might just be 15 minutes of, oh, really? Show that you care. Show that they matter to you. Show that I'm listening. Sometimes some parents will say, oh, I wasn't really listening, but I just wanted her to know that I got you. So even if it means that you will, at the time, pretend that you're listening, just so that this child feel that they are important, because what they're not getting from home, they'll get outside. Because this girl has a best friend who she says, oh, I tell her everything. God help you. The girl or whoever it is she's talking to outside has some right values. If not, then you have something else in your hands to deal with. So no matter how busy you are right now, you will still have to deal with it. We tell people that parenting is an 18-year curriculum. By 19 years, your results will be out. Because that time your child tells you, I'm an adult, Mommy, you can't tell me that. Oh, Daddy, you can't tell me that. They're probably in the university, and then they won't come home. You say, oh, I don't know what's happening. He goes to school and doesn't come back home. To come back to what? To your shouting and your screaming? We never have any conversation because Mommy doesn't think it's necessary. So parents, we need to do better. We need to treat these children as if they're also important.
I value something that you said now, that parents, the whole families, need to have a set of values that they prioritize and imbibe in their children.
Exactly.
Do you see that lacking generally, or is just in pockets?
It's lacking generally. That's we say that family is a production factory of the society. What you see out there is an example of what is happening within the family. How many family has family values and vision?
So marriages are contracted just for the husband and the wife, not with a vision of raising children for the society. That's what you're saying.
They're not even thinking about it. Because every child out there right now troubling the world came out from a family. In fact, the adults that we are all complaining about troubling our world came out from a family.
The area boy.
The area
from
boy,
a family.
It came from a family. If we have all done what we needed to do, we would have all turned out better citizens. So if the people we see around Nigeria right now, do we see people with values? If we don't, then majority of the family, a lot, let me not say majority, a lot then do not have values, because we would see everybody in the society right now, to the politician, to the Okada rider, to the someone in the public sector or private sector, someone in an organization who comes late to work, or someone within the private sector who is rude to the boss, or someone in the private sector who is stealing. they all came out from a family. What value was imputed into
We are
them?
very sober.
we're going to answer this. I hereby, on behalf of all parents who have not done as well as you have accused us, I hereby take your lashing and layard.
And we apologize to our children.
To the children.
And say we are going to try and do better. There's no manual for parenting. We should understand that. Like we always say, that mine has turned out okay, or that yours has turned out okay, is by the special grace of God. There's no manual. You do your best, and you leave the rest.
I guess someone is going to have to come up with that manual. For now, we have to thank you for being here. Mutola Falabi is a family life coach. Thank you so much. We truly appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Can we just have some tension-easing moments? When we return from
we are just being given some humble pie.
We'll be right back. Okay, here we are.
Oh, okay.
Here we are. Here we are.
Yes.
Here we are.
We sure get them on this program.
I'm telling you.
We have another one today. His name is Phage. Phage.
And this one too.
Please.
If
Phage is Phagiro. Of course, he's from my neck of the woods. Us Warri people. Okay, you are near Warri. Where are you from?
I'm from Igbide.
Where is Igbide? It's near
Isoko South. So it's near Ogeli, the axis. Yeah.
Near Ogeli. You see? It's us people. We are the ones that come up with those kinds of names. Phage. But his real name is Phagiro Omo.
Yeah.
A young comic who originally hails from Delta State, of course. He spent the better part of the last 5 years performing stand-ups in bars and lounges and all that. Oh, so you will never find him at home in the evening. Don't bother to go look for him. Yes, Phage, so tell us about you. How did you get into comedy to start with?
So I think it was, as a child, I was very inquisitive. So I had seen comedy on TV, but as people as TV presenters. So there was TA. He had a show called Time Out with TA, and then there was Binga Dinka. He also hosted a TV show at the time. So I was like, I could do this. And then I think I saw some clips from Night of 1,000 Laughs. So it just stayed somewhere in my mind, and I never really tried. I got into university, tried, failed, stopped. Then when I got out of university, I said I'll start hosting events. That didn't work out, so I started cracking jokes, and that seemed to work out. So that's why I'm now.
Who told you you could make people laugh?
It was something that came easy to me. So if I was with people, I would, give a certain life to the room. I was the
life of the party.
Something like that. I'm the last child of my family, so it's obviously on my shoulders to make everybody happy and look for everybody's trouble or be in everybody's business. So, I mean, it was easy. It was an easy career choice.
But how easy is it really to make people laugh?
Okay, that is the complicated part. I believe there's a science and art to laughter. The mood has to be right. People have to feel a certain way, or you have to make them feel a certain way. So it's like painting a picture in people's minds. You're taking them on a journey. So I want you to, I know that the end of what I'm saying should make you laugh, but I have to make you feel a certain way and make you think like I'm thinking, or see it
like
from
that
my point
little
of view.
clip there,
Yes, yes.
You proposing to your darling.
When she eventually comes.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that picture was very clear in my mind.
Yes.
So you get on this boat and you sail to the middle of nowhere, and then you stop and you spin the boat round.
Exactly.
And then you go on one knee. Of course, it's a very clear and, it is a funny picture.
Yes.
And then you end by saying, may God help and make you say no.
Exactly, exactly.
That boat, they go back.
Just to be clear,
Yeah.
will you do that? Okay, just give that to me.
You take her back.
No, in reason, just so I know, in case my daughter comes home and says,
I am Daddy. I met
or like Mr. Macaroni's daughter says, Daddy, meet my...
I don't think for legal reasons I won't give an answer. So it won't be
That's
used
why I said
against
just
me.
leave it as a cliffhanger. Don't even bother.
Yes.
So that any girl who has been shadowing you now will be having second thoughts.
She needs to know what she's what she's signing up for.
That you will take her to the middle of nowhere.
No,
I cannot confirm nor deny. I cannot confirm nor deny. Yeah.
But you know, really, let's ask that question again. You said there is a science and an art to making people laugh. But there are some of your colleagues that have also said there is some kind of engineering to constructing jokes.
Yes.
So I have seen 3 professions already in the science, art, and engineering.
It's everything. I mean, because if you look at it, you find there's this conception that comedians are never-do-wells, or people just stumbled on it.
Not anymore.
The conception still exists.
No, it doesn't.
Well, you are not in the industry, so...
There's still like...
Did your mother say that to you?
So with my mom, and she's watching, so I would say this, sometimes I tell my mom I'm going to work, and she's like, which work?
That work?
But I'm like, I've lived out of your house for a couple of years, and...
I don't try now.
I mean, you see me on TV, your own work, you don't go on TV, so, I mean... Mommy, I love you. I get like, so it's, I don't blame them because like the general conception for most people is you go to school, you get a job.
Yeah, put on your tie every morning.
I mean, and I put on a tie for 4 years. I went to Covenant University, so we wore ties to class. So I think I've worn enough ties for
a lifetime.
For a lifetime.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, you're speaking to the engineering of jokes.
Yes. So jokes are everywhere. So like the clip you played earlier was about proposals. You see proposals every day. But I now have the ability to interpret it in a way that you might have not seen before. Or I tell you what you have seen, but bring another angle to it, a funny angle to it. So jokes are everywhere, in everything, every single thing around us.
Okay. Now, for those who are thinking about a career change, but they have a pharaoh, like a mommy or daddy, to tell, let my people go, what would you advise? How did you cross that Rubicon? Alera, why are you laughing?
No, I just read something, which I'm actually going to read out.
But
we'll answer the question first.
Okay, so let me speak for myself. I consider myself lucky. I have a family that is very supportive, and I wouldn't blame them for being supportive. There are 4 children, so they have succeeded with 3 before me, so that's 75% of. So if I don't turn out well, I've done well before. But I have a very supportive family who support my dreams, and they gave me room to succeed or fail.
Be yourself.
To be myself. And if you find yourself in that opportunity, in that space, and you have that opportunity, good for you. But in the event that you do not, my best advice is the only way you can tell people that you can do something is by actually doing it. So by the time they see that you're succeeding at it, they will, maybe this boy or this girl has some prospects in this like space, and then they'll let you go.
So when you told mommy, for instance, you can be hypothetical. Mommy, I'm sorry. You can be hypothetical. Say, okay, Mom, I want to go into, or Dad, I want to go into comedy, or your siblings, I want to go into comedy. What was the initial reaction?
It was a gradual process, so it took them by surprise. So I told them I was coming to Lagos because I wanted to host events.
Okay.
So I came for youth service, I got a job, and I was doing that by the side. So the whole process, they were like, okay, maybe he will give up eventually, let's see how this goes. And then in that space and time, I started getting into the game and into the industry, meeting people. I got on several shows, got on platforms that seemed reputable. I met influential people in the industry. And once these things happen, I'll tell them. So they're like, these Peking don't meet Alibaba, don't meet Baskem, I don't meet all these people. So Maybe. So
Maybe something there.
Exactly. So I just need to start making enough money so it will convince them finally. Because right now they are still.
You are still on con.
Yeah.
Not the veins never enter.
It's not fully there yet.
Okay. Now, you all need to hear this. When Phage is not telling tales about his encounters on the streets of Lagos, you can find him wasting away his human resource management degree while daydreaming of making it big and convincing himself that he's not wasting his family resources on his master's degree.
Mommy, we read it on air. So he appreciates, he wrote it himself.
Yes, yes.
Mommy, just so you know, he wrote it himself. I can neither confirm nor deny. That's what he said. But, you know, how important do you see academic education? Here is why I'm asking, and I know we're running out of time. I was at Alibaba Spontaneity last year, and I saw some of the questions that were asked. I mean, you know the way it goes.
Yes. I've failed at that competition 3 times. So.
Oh, really?
Yes. The last 3 editions before this one, yeah. I was in the finals of all of them.
So what happened?
I failed. That's what happened. I failed. But
what would you say you have learned from that? Because I know you're educated, so naturally, if you're not really, not just educated but intelligent, you might have a little difficulty, right?
Well, as with any profession, it's good to have a certain level of education. But that doesn't take away the place of skill and talent.
Yeah.
So what education gives you is it gives you the edge to be accessible to a plethora of people, like a lot of people at a time. Like one thing I'm always grateful for is I had the opportunity to have a well-rounded education. So not just going to school, getting a degree, I also took part in extracurricular activities, which was very important. So right from secondary school, I debated, I did public speaking, I partook in competitions and the like. So those skills I picked speaking to audiences and speaking to public from secondary school are part of the things that helped me today.
Gave you confidence.
Yes, I did theater arts for 3 years in secondary school, just 1 to just 3. Sheon Kimbalwe was my teacher.
No wonder he's acting on Politics Today.
He was my theater arts teacher in secondary school. So I'm grateful for the education I had. And it, not to sound proud, but it shows when I work, because you can tell that this will not be...
It goes school small.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's it.
Okay. Now, your education is one thing. Then getting material for your jokes is another.
Yeah.
Because I know for a fact that Alibaba has a huge library.
A repository, yeah.
And he reads.
Yes.
Do you find that that is necessary for you as well?
So stand-up comedy is an observational art form as well as a form of social commentary. So you need to digest information first before you can give out any form of information. So reading is important. My generation, we have challenges with that. I personally...
Because you have this...
We have phones and the internet.
Google.
I try to read and I watch a lot of stuff, but I don't think I read as much as I should. I should be reading. That's something I should work on. But you need that. And I would say this. One thing that makes the Nigerian comedian very lucky is we live in Nigeria. There are jokes every day. These jokes make themselves.
Except you're walking with your eyes
Even
closed.
If you're walking with your eyes closed, you will hear the jokes. Like, they just keep coming. Nigeria is the gift that keeps giving. If we're not talking about the redesign of the Naira today, we're talking about the outcome of the elections. You can hear 5 different comedians talk about the outcome of the elections.
How is the
And
Naira
the jokes will not be the same.
And they don't repeat themselves.
How is the Naira redesign funny?
It is. I mean, everybody's complaining about not having money. There are people who nobody's asking about.
GG.
People who do diabolical things for money rituals.
Oh.
When would the newly designed Naira reach the shrines? I mean, we who go to queue at the bank, we don't have them. But somebody now is opening his closet, expecting money to come out, and it's old money that's coming out. We need to ask these questions. These are the questions we need to be asking.
Children are mad.
So,
well, the Supreme Court has helped now.
And then the native doctor is shouting, "Praise Jesus." Thanking God. God,
Native doctor is shouting, "Praise Jesus."
What God cannot do does not exist. He's happy. He's thanking God. So, I'm normal on Mondays.
Only on Mondays?
On Mondays, I'm normal, because that's my weekend, so I'm normal on Mondays.
Okay. All right.
Who else is now? So it's only the ritualists that we are not asking.
We are not asking, then maybe like police, airport staff, nobody asks about them. Those ones, they can collect transfer. The spiritual world does not. Their banking system is different from ours. Yeah, so.
Hello, let's go home.
What's a valid point?
Yeah, it is a valid point. It's just that nobody ever thought of it.
Exactly.
Except the comedian.
Hello,
ritualist.
Let's go home.
The ritualist.
Yes. You're saying praise Jesus now.
Every Saturday, Sha. They just bring up all kinds of people here to just come and tell us all kinds. Today they brought Fejiro Omo. And he says the ritualist, before the money go reach him, go tea.
Yes, because the...
So ritualist is out of business right now.
It's part of the unbanked that we talk about. It's the unbanked percentage of the populace. He's a Nigerian like all of us.
Hello, let's go.
I think it's time to carry your madness out of here. Since you say you're only saying on Mondays. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Fejiro Omo. Thank you very much. I must attend one of your shows.
Definitely. Thank you.
And that is where we weigh anchor today. I'm Naira Redesign wishing you a very happy weekend, and I will not be seeing you next week because we have elections next week. So see you in 2 weeks, and please go out there and vote. Please, don't be discouraged by last week. I know that could happen. Please.
Amayo Makinde, don't forget, at the end of the day, elections will come and go. We will still have our friends. Stay peaceful, stay loving. Bye for now.